Okay, good evening, everyone. Okay, welcome to our March Board of Education meeting. And can everyone please stand for the pledge? And I do ask everyone to remain standing after the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So please remain standing. We were saddened today when we learned the news of our employee, Joseph Scapatori, who was part of our team that keeps the grounds looking so good. And he passed away in a car accident yesterday. So our thoughts are with his family and with those he was close with. So please join me in observing a brief moment of silence. Thank you very much. Please take a seat. Okay. First on the agenda, we'll have Dr. Christopher Hale, our coordinator of Fine and Performing Arts, to introduce our All-Eastern musicians.
Good evening, Dr. Rogers, Ms. Chang, and the Board of Education. It's a busy time of year for the Fine and Performing Arts. This past weekend, we honored our all-county artists. Next week, we open our spring musical, School of Rock, and we also wish our high school chamber orchestra luck as they compete at the ASA Nationals in Atlanta, Georgia. But tonight, I am incredibly proud to take a moment to recognize 6 outstanding musicians from Syosset who have been selected for the NAFME All-Eastern Honors Ensembles. This prestigious honor places them among the finest high school musicians from the Eastern region, and these ensembles each draw in students from Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont, and the District of Columbia. So it's very, very selective. Their selection is a testament to their extraordinary talent, dedication, and countless hours of practice, as well as the unwavering support of their teachers and to stand out among musicians from 12 states and the District of Columbia is an exceptional achievement, and we could not be prouder. So congratulations to our 6 All-Eastern musicians, and I'd like to announce that them being here tonight. We have Lisa Yasinov, mixed chorus. Ziwen Zhang, mixed chorus. Alice Wang, treble corps. And Jesse Namkung, symphonic band. And also, we had 2 musicians that could not join us tonight because, of course, they have rehearsal. Darren Lung on symphonic band, as well as Elena Serber in the treble choir. So congratulations to them as well. So congratulations once again. This is really a testament to all of the hard work that you've done. It's a tremendous honor being selected for that one ensemble from all of those states. So we are incredibly proud of you, and thank you.
Congratulations again to these students and their families. And we hopefully will hear you perform one day. Thank you. All right, and now would be your perfect chance to make graceful exit if you don't want to stay for the remaining of the meeting. Okay. All right. So now we're moving on to our business, and that's going to be 6A and 6B, and which can be taken together. And they're the approval of minutes of the January 30th, 2025 work session and the February 10th, 2025 board meeting. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? And the Citizens Finance Committee met on February 12, 2025, and we will have Mr. Ostrich to report on that.
Thank you, Ms. Cheng. The Citizens Finance Committee met with one topic on its mind, which was insurance. We discussed 2 major elements of the current state of the insurance market. One is the difficulty in the insurance market related to CVA or Child Victim Act claims. that has been driving up claims for insurance and therefore premiums across the market. And number two, the competitive landscape of insurance in terms of bids and the options available for the district in discussion and consideration for thinking about how we can best position ourselves for insurance RFPs in the future. So Dr. Rogers, was there anything else that I left out? I don't want to leave anything out for the board.
Not that you left out, I would just go into slightly more detail to just elaborate on the insurance landscape. You talked about the number of entrants in the market. There are very few that are providing services to school districts, so that makes it challenging for us because there isn't a lot of competition.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ostrick and Dr. Rogers. And then from what I understand, the committee is going to meet again tomorrow, so we will hear some more updates at the next meeting. Okay. All right, and Dr. Rufo, can we have the treasurer's report and appropriation adjustments, please?
Okay, as shown on the treasurer's report, the cash on hand for the month end January 2025 was $111,106,639.99. It shows that all bank balances for all cash accounts were reconciled to the book balances and were collateralized in accordance with the district's banking agreements and investment policy. Thank you.
Seven B and 7C can be taken together, and that the approval of treasurer's report and appropriations adjustment. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Parks. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 7D is the acceptance of the internal audit reports. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Falco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and then we're moving on to Dr. Rogers, the superintendent's report.
Thank you. We have two presentations for you. As the board knows, over a year ago, we learned that the math program that was adopted back in 2014 was no longer going to be supported by the vendor. So we had to explore, we had the opportunity to explore new math programs or the update to the existing math program. And that gave us the opportunity to look at how we were doing math instruction in light of the fact that the state had changed the standards and that we had also improved over the course of the last decade. So we're here to report. We put together a committee of teachers and leaders to evaluate the options that were out there. They made a selection. We've done some preparation for the staff. And now we're about 3/4 of the way through the year and here to report on how that decision went. And then we'll follow that with a follow-up conversation from our discussion last month about the state's new graduation requirements, and we'll do a deep dive into pathways.
And before we do that, we are actually going to have Dr. Rufo to do the budget presentation. And then we'll do the
Okay, good evening. Tonight is our second budget presentation for the 25-26 school year, February 10th. We talked about the capital and the admin sections, and we went over the tax cap. And tonight we're going to go over some aspects of revenue, take a look at some program codes, and also take a look at benefits. So last time around, we talked a little bit about the primary goal for our budget, which was to preserve our programs and our services for students. And Like I would say the last couple of years, the 23, 24, the 24, 25, 25, 26 is shaping up to be a challenging budget season. And a lot of the reasons are up there, the factors. And two of the factors we've been seeing repeatedly over the last couple of years, and that's the enrollment growth and the inflationary increases. And so those two factors combined really put a lot of pressure on the budget. And while we've been managing to both stay in under the cap and preserve all of the existing programs and services, we have to be mindful that that's not something that is manageable indefinitely and in the future. And we are losing ground and really tightening due to these factors. And then we have, in addition to those, we have our health insurance premium increase. We'll talk about that in the benefits section. In terms of transportation, I mentioned last time that our contractor was not willing to renew the contracts at CPI. So we went out to bid, and we just received those bids back, so it's not appropriate at this time to go into that any further, but we anticipate increases well above what would have been on CPI. Right before this, there was discussion about the environment for casualty and liability insurance, and that's a pressure that we continue to feel. So despite all these factors, we anticipate that for the 25-26 year, we'll be right up, pressing up against that cap. Over the last years, we've been more than 11 million under the cap. But this time around, we'll need to close the gap and get under the tax cap. We'll need to do that both by revisiting on the expenditure side, many of the items that I talked about at our February meeting, the capital items, equipment, projects, and looking to phase those, just kind of how we worked the budget this year, phase those projects, take another look at the equipment, we're in the midst of that now, and make some of those reductions so that we can preserve the program piece of the budget. And so the other side to that is, so that you have one on the savings side, that's the expenditures, but those changes alone, those reductions are not going to get us under the cap. So we're going to have to lean in to our reserves a little bit more, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to this section. So overall, our benefits, and these are preliminary because we're still working through all of the staffing, and benefits are tied to staffing. So these are preliminary numbers right now, and that you can see that overall, we have an increase of about 1.8 million or 2.42% in benefits, and that's driven primarily by health insurance. You can see that that line is up about $1 million. Which really just reflects, I have actually a 10% increase baked into over this year's actual expenditures. It's showing up as 2.34 because our actual expenditures for this year are lower than anticipated. So that's good news for this year, that our number, that the health insurance number came in, the premium rates were much lower than anticipated. But I've retained 10% in for next year. So while there's a $1.8 million in benefits, we do use our reserves to help offset some of the benefits. So through the use of our restricted reserves, when we've had increases in these areas, we've been able to offset them by using our reserves. So for the 24-25 budget, we've used about 7.2 million of our reserves, primarily in ERS, which is the top number, then TRS, and then workers' comp, unemployment, and EBAL, which is the employee benefits accrued liability. And those are expenses when people separate from the district, accumulated benefits, sick time, and things like that, separation payments. So for the 25-26 year, at this point, we're looking at increasing that to about 8.2 million at this time. And some of that change is in ERS, so we're looking to increase that by $500,000. And that 4.5 million that we're planning on using reflects the actual expenditure. So our reserves fully fund the ERS. TRS, the TRS full expenditure is about 12 million. Back here, second line at the top, 12.4 million, and we're using about 2 million of that reserve. And right now, we don't show any change in that. There was actually a decrease in TRS this year, for next year, because their employee contribution rate declined. So even though it declined because of the need to close the budget gap, we may need to consider allocating more of the TRS reserve for next year just to get us there. And then the workers' comp is an increase, again, that reflects increased, we're looking, we monitor that number throughout the year. Some of that is increased settlements, and then increased health insurance works its way into workers' comp payments. And down at the right, I don't know you can fully see it behind the curtain, but those show you from the audited financial statements, the balances in those restricted reserves at June 2024, just to get a sense of proportion. And then we went over the state aid last, particularly foundation aid at our last meeting, and so those numbers are still holding, although we are working on revising potentially the BOCES aid. Some of the items that we had in our budget to purchase next year, we're considering doing those through projects with BOCES this year, and not only will that help reduce the budget for next year, we will be able to accumulate or count the BOCES aid, which for our BOCES projects is anywhere between 50 and 60%. That would bump up our aid next year, so it would help in two ways. So the next section that we're going to look at is the program section. And the program section accounts for over 3/4 of the budget. It contains all of the regular and special education. On the right-hand side shows all the functional codes that make up the program section. And overall, and again, I just can't emphasize enough that staffing right now is very preliminary, so these numbers will change as we advance through the staffing meetings. But at this point in time, our program budget shows a $7.5 million increase, or 4.75%. Contractual salary increases and staffing additions that we had in the current year certainly contribute to some of that increases. At this time, again, the program shows an increase, while it's still preliminary, of an increase of 5 FTEs. If you look to the right two columns is an increase of 5, and that's in the area of special ed, and we'll get to that in a moment. So the 2110 code, which is up there, represents about a third of the budget at $90 million, and that's a $2.8 million increase, or 3.2%. It's the largest function code in the district. And this contains the salaries of all of our classroom teachers, support staff, supplies and materials. And what goes into the 2.9% are contractual adjustments to salaries, staffing shifts that occurred in the current year, and those were principally in the secondary schools, although there was some shifting in the elementaries. Currently, there's no additional staff in this code at this time, although that could change. Expenses for BOCES services that you can see halfway down the page increased. And those are due to additional elementary field trips consolidated into this code, as well as additional arts and ed. And again, those are expenses that we receive revenue for in the form of state aid, anywhere from 50 to 60% of those expenditures. There's also an increase in the supply line, and those are due to allocations for new science lab supplies and materials in the secondary schools to meet new state standards. Special ed is our second largest instructional code. And that includes, the code includes costs for our entire special education program, classroom teachers, speech teachers, physical and occupational therapists, and our special education support staff, our tutors, and our TAs. In addition, further down the page, you see tuition, the students that go to BOCES programs and private and public schools. Overall, you can see that special ed is forecast to increase about 2.2 million, or 6.8%. So additional support staff that was hired in the current year based on IEPs and student needs, as well as an additional special kindergarten class, results in an increase of about 5 FTEs. Contractual salaries, including tuition and BOCES, is based on the current year, and that also can shift. Our continuing education program offers programs to our community members, and our summer school, right beneath that, offers both enrichment and remediation, and both of those codes are relatively flat, and they reflect expenditure trends over the last couple of years. All instructional media for the district students are captured in this code in the library media programs. And the increase of about $117,000 or 3.4% is due to contractual salary adjustments, as well as staffing adjustments that we made in the current year to support additional audiovisuals, to provide additional audiovisual support, and also additional Chromebook repair and assistance. Instructional technology. This includes costs for computer hardware and software related to instruction. So most of the increase, 328 out of the 341K, is for BOCES services. And this is essentially for the AI, artificial intelligence pilots that those projects that the district has started this year and will continue into the next year. Our guidance and our health services codes increased primarily due to contractual adjustments and little shifting among the codes. Psychologists and social workers are similar. The psychological services shows a decrease in contractual services of $45,000, which offsets some of the increase in the contractual lines. And doesn't reflect a reduction in services for kids, it's just a reallocation. And then the social worker, it shows our 5 social workers, and just to remind you that the 5 are paid for by the grant. Our co-curricular code is up about 114K or 4.5%. This contains expenses for chaperones, for club advisors, and you can see that the increase is in travel. We have, our clubs are doing very well, and our competition clubs are seeing a lot of success. So that's increased travel costs, and then overall travel costs have gone up, so that's what's contributing to the increase in that code. Athletics is up about 1.68%, and driven mostly by an increased equipment allocation. right now that there's and this is replacement equipment for hurdles, lacrosse and soccer goals, a blocking sled, and swimming platforms. So we're also looking to see if some of that can be purchased in the current year, and then it would come out for 25-26. And so those are the major highlights of the program code, and we will be working in addition to the program codes, going back and looking at our other sections of the budget. We'll be providing an update at our next meeting and finalizing our revenue. We're looking at our local revenue, tightening those, as I said, state aid, in preparation for a budget adoption in April.
Thank you, Dr. Rufo, for that comprehensive presentation. Are there any questions from the board for Dr. Rufo? Mr. Ostrich, please.
Dr. Rufo, can you remind me what a 200-day salary is?
Those are our aides that work 200 days. So they provide support in our special education classrooms.
And lastly, can you help me understand from the medical insurance part, is it the increase of $1 million? Is it one policy? Is it multiple policies? Is it stuff that we're self-insuring? How do I think about the division of that increase?
So, so health insurance rates come from NYSHIP, and there are a variety of different rates. Premium, it's mainly increases in premiums, individual premiums, family premiums, medical premiums, and half of that year is known because they operate on a calendar year. So I know what half of the expenses will be, and I have a projection of 10% in for the second half of the year.
Okay. Mr. Greco, please.
You mentioned that ERS is going to be budgeted at 4.5, and that'll all come from reserves, and TRS would be the same 2.1 that you budgeted last year, which of course is nowhere near the full amount needed. Is it limited in any way? Because you also mentioned that you would use, if there was any, I think you called it a budget gap, you would use the TRS reserves. But is it limited in some way? Because I noticed that it's 2.1 for the last 2 years, and I was wondering if that was based on a formula.
No, it is not. Funding the reserve is limited by a certain amount each year, 2% of your reportable earnings. But to your question, it's not restricted in how much you can use. You just have to be mindful that when you use it, yeah.
A couple other quick items. Since we've been spending a lot of time in Citizens Finance talking about insurance, and I remember from last month, the insurance budget went from about 1.6 to about 1.9, and I'm wondering, because I know sometimes you allocate items throughout the budget, is there any insurance allocated in today's budget? Obviously not workers' comp or anything that's, related to employment, but is the summer school portion of our risk policy a portion to summer school, or is everything wrapped up in the admin budget that you budgeted at 1.9 last month?
I believe that all insurance is in the insurance code, which it rolls up into the administrative budget, which I presented last month. There isn't other lines in here.
Okay, Dr. Rufo, since we're in the process of changing our mascot, just wanted to know if that cost is already embedded in the draft budget, or are we anticipating anything from the state for the cost of that?
We had put an allocation for mascot-related capital work, mainly the turf field, in the prior year's budget. So that's in our transfer to capital line, which is the largest component.
Okay, are there any more questions for Dr. Rufo? Mr. Rotolo?
Thank you, Mrs. Chang. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Rufo. In light of the uncertainty with the federal funding for our 2025 budget, 26, do you anticipate what effect that would have on our budget? And if so, what remedies would we employ?
That would, loss of federal aid would be, that we have about 2 million, off the top of my head, that we have in our 611 and 619, and I'm looking at Aaron, who's nodding in the affirmative. So if that funding if we were not to receive that funding, then we would have to bring those, if they're salaries, bring those on to the general fund, into the general fund budget.
Dr. Park?
Last year, we had very detailed foundation aid allocated for each school. I didn't get that this year. Do you know if there is any foundation aid that you're estimating that doesn't have the net benefit to us, such as universal pre-K?
The foundation aid by school, is that, the UPK, is that what we,
So last year, we had detailed lists of what each school was going to receive, and it was itemized so we could see how much UPK amount was. And for that item, if we didn't have enough students to fulfill that amount that is allocated us, we had to refund it. So
Oh.
it didn't really benefit us in terms of the number.
okay, so yes, we received a higher, so let's say it's 5,400, I think is the amount that we receive per student. And you're correct that if you can't use, the allocation is on a per student basis. And if you don't exhaust your entire allocation, you're correct, and you can't take the additional funds and allocate them to the number of spots that you have. What we're able to do, Mrs. Wojcik was able to, Dr. Wojcik was able to secure additional funding that enabled for a certain number to increase that. That doesn't, okay.
So my question was whether that foundation aid that you're estimating we are going to fully utilize that amount.
The UPK.
So I'm going to draw a distinction and see if I've got your question right. So foundation aid is an entitlement formula. What that means is it is calculated through a formula, X number of students, certain amount of wealth in the district, fiscal capacity, it grinds through a formula, and then a number comes out. That number is allocated to the district, to the whole district, not to individual buildings. It's just a revenue to the whole district. UPK is not an entitlement formula, it is a grant formula. So it works differently. So as a grant formula, the way the grant is written is they will give us a certain amount, $2,500-ish per pupil. What's the right number?
54.
54, I knew I was way off. Okay, $5,400 per pupil. And that's sort of use it or lose it. So if we identify the kids who are going to use that grant, for every student that we can name, we will get the $5,400. So Dr. Wojcik got a grant that will up that from $5,400 to $10,000 a student, but not for the entire number of students, but for a lot. So it's an increase of about $900,000 for us. But those grants are not entitlement programs, so they're structured a little bit differently. So yeah, exactly. It's not part of foundation aid because it is a state revenue, but foundation aid is one of many state revenues. UPK is also one of many state revenues. It's structured as a grant, foundation is an entitlement, and then there are programs, state funds that are reimbursements. So Dr. Rufo referred to BOCES aid, transportation aid, and building aid, and she was talking about the reimbursements that we would get next year for expenditures made this year. So a easy way of trying to explain this is if we buy this microphone from a store, it's $20. If we buy it from BOCES, it's $20, but next year we get a $10 refund. So the net benefit of buying through BOCES is if we wait a year, we'll get reimbursed back. So to the extent that we can, we try to run many of these purchases through BOCES in order to draw down this reimbursement aid. So obviously we're working on a large bond right now. As we finalize projects and then we turn in what are called final cost reports, we'll say what it costs to build the fitness center that's behind the high school right now. Then we'll start getting aid on the fitness center. And again, it's a reimbursement. So we have entitlement aids, reimbursement aids, and grant aids. And they all kind of operate with different rules. So on the revenue slide that Dr. Rufo had towards the beginning of the presentation, she showed them all as a stack of revenues. And to us, they all are revenues, but the rules behind them are different.
Ms. Valkov?
Hi. You may not know this, I'm not sure, so if I put you on the spot, I'm really sorry. But is there any state aid that we get that actually comes from federal aid to the state, to us, that you know that we're at risk of losing or could be affected?
I think that we talked about UPK. Some of that is federal. Obviously the grants. When we look at our cafeteria, reimbursement for meals comes, it's not general fund, but that as well. E-rate funding is a federal program. So those are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, I would also throw Medicaid in there as well.
Yes,
That's
as
a
a
huge
revenue,
revenue program for us. And it's
Yeah.
also a huge revenue program for the state. So to the extent that Medicaid reimbursements go down, the state's fiscal plan runs a deficit, and their ability to fund things like general fund, school aid are weakened if they experience losses in what are for them big reimbursement programs like Medicaid. But we also get Medicaid reimbursement for typically services to students with disabilities.
Mr. Greco?
Dr. Rogers, this may be for you. I noticed we're budgeting the exact same for summer school. I know sometimes that can be based on what we have as an expected enrollment or possibly a change to the program. Are there any changes expected, or keeping the same summer school 2.0 that has been so successful so many years?
Yeah, our plan right now is to continue with the summer school that we revised in the same way that we have. So we have a combination of extended year programs, year-round schooling for students with the most significant learning challenges that need a year-round program. And then we have the enrichment program that we offer as well. And driver's ed, and those are, and then some swimming instruction that takes place during the summer. So right now we're planning on keeping all of that intact.
Okay, are there any more questions? Okay, thank you, Dr. Rufo
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you.
Ms. Chang?
Oh, yes.
Can I just circle back? I was going to elaborate on two of the responses that Dr. Rufo gave, even though they were excellent. To Mr. Ostrich's question on medical insurance, just one point of elaboration. We, like nearly every school district in the downstate region, use the New York State Health Insurance Plan. And the reason we do that is because the way the state's plan is structured is it's a blended rate between downstate and upstate. So we're sort of getting downstate cost health insurance for middle of the state cost prices. So typically that looks like a good deal for school districts in the downstate region. But it does mean that we're subject to the decisions the state makes about how they use their reserves to offset payment costs that they're anticipating. And then, Mr. Rotolo, you asked a question about, uncertainty in federal funding. So Dr. Rufo said 611, 619, those are special education codes. So the two revenue sources that come directly to us, the three are Medicaid reimbursements, IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, those are special education fundings, the 611, 619, and then we get some Title I funding as well. So on one of Dr. Rufo's slides, she noted that we have a social worker in every building. 5 of those social workers are paid for with school district funds, and 5 of those social workers are paid for on grant funds, typically IDEA grant funds. So if those grant funds were to disappear, then we would either not be able to fund those positions, or we would have to fund them out of the school budget, which means that we would have to identify something else that we're spending money on and choose to spend that money instead on the social workers.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rogers. Okay, and then we are going to have Dr. Wojcik to give us a presentation on elementary mathematics.
Okay, good evening, Dr. Rogers, Dr. Curry, and the Board of Education. This evening, Ms. Barbara Fournier, our Administrator of Elementary STEM, and I will be presenting information about our elementary mathematics program. So, as always, we tie all of our work back to the district's mission and vision statement. So when looking at elementary mathematics and looking at our academic vision statement, we always want to make sure that we're inspiring our students to live as lifelong learners, nurturing their intellectual potential, and making sure that we create learners that are agile, creative, adaptable learners, really using programs that are innovative, engaging, and build their capacity to think. So, in order to understand where we are in math learning today, we can take a look back at the recent history of mathematic learning at the elementary level. So in 2012 and 2013, this was the first introduction to the Common Core Learning Standards. And so at that time, SIASET selected the Go Math program as it moves to the Common Core Learning Standards. 2015 and 2017, Go Math undergoes a series of updates to stay abreast of content and learning standards. In 2018 and 19, we revamp our report card, our elementary report cards, in order to align with the newly adopted next generation learning standards. At the time of the Next Generation Learning Standards, Go Math had decided that their 2015 version was going to sunset in 2023, and a new successor program was going to be developed. And so at that point, we began the process with a committee to determine what program at the elementary level we would be using. So we convened a committee of educators, and as those educators came together, we really talked about starting with the why as we look at a resource selection. So it's important to recognize that a primary resource is not a curriculum. So our curriculum is based in the Next Generation Learning Standards, and our primary resource allows us to ensure equity across all 7 elementary schools. It's an opportunity as we look at resource selection to gain greater alignment with the standards, to look and account for our professional growth, and then to ensure that SIASET continues to promote academic achievement, mathematical thinking, critical thinking, and reasoning. So as the committee came together, they looked at specific questions that they determined specific themes from. So what are the benefits and outcomes we want for students? And the committee indicated that these were the hopes that a resource would provide: increased confidence in applying math to real-world situations, looking at problem solving and critical thinking, advanced mathematical reasoning, to be better prepared for higher level math, but also STEM learning, and to really look at learning in a targeted and personalized way. And then based on those benefits and outcomes, we can see that our educators are looking for a primary resource that benefits the identified previous slide, but also looks at a balance of teacher-created curriculums and resource materials. They were looking for hands-on, engaging learning, math games, center activities, really a resource that promoted space for mathematical thinking, critical thinking, and one that really struck a balance between computation and deep problem solving. So, as I said, we convened a committee. That committee was comprised of classroom teachers, special educators, our developmental learning teachers, interventionists, enrichment teachers, staff developers, administrators, all stakeholders involved in looking at different programs that we could bring in as a primary resource. So a rubric was used for comparative analysis among the programs that we looked at, looking at 4 key dimensions or 4 key areas, looking at alignment to the depth of the standard, how closely it was aligned to the next generation standards, looking at key shifts in focus from Common Core to the next generation learning standards, looking at instructional supports for educators as well as the types of assessments used within the program. Based on that rubric, we evaluated in several products and participated in demonstrations, Envisions, Investigations, Reveal, and Go Math.
Good evening. The Go Math redesign aimed to make math instruction engaging and effective for all students. They are now fully aligned with the next generation learning standards, and they provide focused instruction and facilitate conceptual understanding using shorter chapters. The updated online platform is user-friendly for both teachers and students, and it provides access to student edition workbooks, including digital manipulatives, ENL support, and math on the spot videos, which are short targeted video tutorials offering students step-by-step explanations and examples for targeted help when and where they need it. Waggle is the new and exciting digital learning platform that provides adaptive practice on an engaging platform. It's connected to NWEA data, so once students start using it, Waggle will analyze the data and provide each student with a personalized learning experience. It gives them real-time feedback and helps students learn from their mistakes. It gives them hints to help students engage with the material. And the fun part, it has embedded gaming that rewards positive learning behavior. And we have our 2 little, their guys aren't moving. They were moving when we were watching this, but it's a lot of fun. It kind of looks like a little Minecraft activity for kids, and they really enjoy interacting with Waggle. And we also have more online resources for families. Yeah. So this graph shows our digital usage data. The blue bars indicate the number of total unique users, and it's broken down by week. The orange bars show the total number of times logged in. So if we look across the blue bar, we can see consistent usage across the board. One of the tall bars in October, I think it ends October 26th, that was the week that we did our staff training in the fall, which created a jump in our overall usage going forward. Also interesting to note is that Christmas, the winter break week, end of December, we had 41 individual users log on 65 different times while out of school. So kids were interested in the program even while they were home. And this is all to keep in mind that this is just digital usage. This is in addition to the math the in-person math that's going on within each classroom. Yeah, you can go on. So as far as implementation and support, we wanted to give teachers a preview of some of the updates to the new Go Math program. So we ran a PD back in the spring of '24, and teachers left that preview with their teachers' editions so they could start to plan over the summer if they chose to. And a curriculum writing project was developed over the summer of '24 that was turnkeyed during the superintendent conference days in the fall of this year. We also conducted an initial in-person training by grade level in the fall of the school year. We're also providing ongoing professional development using something called Coachly, which is a professional development service that provides teachers with unlimited access to dedicated instructional coaches through the Go Math platform. It offers personalized support, real-time messaging with a coach, and self-scheduled virtual coaching sessions. In February, we ran a parent workshop for families, and that was very well attended. We've also been collecting feedback from staff, students, and families, and we'll use that feedback to make improvements during our upcoming summer curriculum writing. Going with teacher feedback, we've been seeking teacher feedback monthly since the beginning of the school year as we work through this first year to ensure that we're being responsive to any challenges the educators may be facing. The top feedback was really around chapter and lesson order, the pacing of lessons, and the order of report card indicators. The feedback will be addressed during summer curriculum writing, where we will take a look at the scope and sequence of the program and make adjustments to the sequencing based on what we learned this year. Another theme of the feedback centered around website navigation that is being addressed through the Coachly sessions that I mentioned earlier. So what are people saying? Teachers are saying that they really like the online platform. Anything that's new is a little tricky at first, but they're saying that it's more accessible and it's easier to find things. They also like that Waggle is engaging and aligned to NWEA scores without them having to input any of the data. They like the editable tests, which allow them to create more custom content for their students and to provide for more differentiation in instruction. And they also really appreciate the Coachly sessions, calling them an amazing resource they will definitely utilize again. Parents are saying they really enjoyed the parent presentation that we had in February. They thought it was informative, and they like being able to access the workbook online so they can help their children at home. Now, the students, when asked about this new program, students thought Waggle was very fun. Because if you complete a mission, you earn a token and can play with your friends. They also like doing stations and the math games, and they feel more challenged and independent and less reliant on their teachers for support. Dr. Rogers held an elementary student council meeting earlier in the school year, and at that time, students reported a high level of interest and engagement in the Waggle program. So it seems to be going well.
So as you can see, Go Math has had success in its implementation and feedback from all those who engage in it. But how do we know if the program's working? So besides looking at our local assessments, such as unit tests and math application in our project-based learning, we can take a look at our longitudinal New York State assessment data. We can see here that our level of proficiency, and that's the percentage of students who earn a 3 or a 4 on the New York State Math Assessment, has remained steady or increased over the course of the years we have been using Go Math since 2013 as a primary resource. So it should be noted, just as a point of note, that there's no comparative data for 2021. So 2020, due to COVID, there was no New York State assessments. And then in 2021, you see our SIACIT, that's the blue bar. There was no comparative data from the New York State Ed Department due to COVID-19, due to the state opt-out rate, which was very high, 60%. And so therefore, because of this, they didn't offer the comparison for the region and for the state. And then as we look at the cohort data, you can see that this allows us to see groups over time and see how groups of students or a cohort perform as they move through the grade levels. So we can see steady scores across grade levels, and we use this data to ensure that a comparative lens, our math curriculum, including our primary resource, meets the needs of our students and ensures that they are challenged academically. So what does this all mean moving forward? So we are going to continue to evaluate the effectiveness of our primary resource. This includes gathering more feedback from all participants, looking at student mastery skills, looking at performance moving forward on our New York State assessments. We're going to be identifying enhancements to be made through summer curriculum writing, as Ms. Fournier spoke about, based on feedback from our teachers as far as scope and sequence and pacing. We're definitely going to continue to develop more project-based learning opportunities, which are designed to promote that deeper mathematical thinking. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any questions from the board? Mr. Rotolo?
Thank you, Dr. Wilczek, for that excellent presentation. So as soon as you did your third page and kind of went back to Common Core, I started to have flashbacks.
I think a lot of us did.
So I'm a CPA, my wife's a CPA, my next door neighbor's a theoretical math professor in college, and we could not teach second graders to do math. So my only question or 2 cents is, can we please have something for the parents, because it's frustrating at 9 o'clock at night when can't explain the homework to the child.
So I think what's really beneficial about the updated Go Math program is that the platform that teachers use with the students in class is accessible to families. So at our parent workshop, we spent some time working with families to log on to the platform and to access the Math on the Spot videos, which reteach to children what took place, as well as provide an opportunity to see the workbook pages. There's also a parent family room, they call it, where families can go in and there's articles on how to promote mathematical thinking and how to connect to what's being taught in the classroom. I agree, there were lots of feedback about families being able to support their children, and this program was responsive to that.
Ms. Koshia?
Thank you for the presentation. I just have a question for you about the hands-on factor, because I see a lot of it is digital and online, which is great. And I know the kids love it, and there's games involved, so of course it gets the mind going. But my question to you is, one of the last things you said was continue to develop more project-based learning opportunities. So my question is, the project-based learning opportunities, would you foresee it being more hands-on and just throughout the course of the day on a daily basis for the kids? Will they have hands-on opportunities, or would you say the majority of it is digital? I guess that's my question.
No, that's a great question. There's the majority of the learning is not digital in the classroom. So mathematical learning takes on a workshop learning model. So the structure looks like a full mini lesson with all students working towards the aim that the teacher is trying to teach. And during that time, part of the kits come with manipulative kits. So fraction strips, Unifix cubes, coins, dollars, anything that the students may use manipulative-wise to work towards the concept that the teacher is teaching. Then based on that, students then break out into centers. Those centers are different opportunities for students to engage in the aim that the teacher is teaching. One of those centers is Waggle, usually, where students will go on the Chromebook, and then they rotate during that center time. And then the teacher has an opportunity to work with students who need extra reteaching or extension. So the majority of the learning within the classroom setting is actually not related to the digital platform. The digital platform is new, which is why we highlighted it more so. So thank you for your question, because I think it brings to the forefront that the majority of learning is not digital. And then our project-based learning is incorporated throughout a lot of our grade levels. We use things like our Tiny Homes project, where students have to build and use mathematical thinking and reasoning. One kindergarten group designs super coops for the chicks as they come. So what type of chicken coop could they use, and the angle of the ramp for the chicks to get up. So there's definitely project-based learning that takes place, but the digital platform is an enhancement to that. You're welcome.
Ms. Abramson?
I'm sorry, and correct me, and you can even yell at me if you mention this, but when you brought up Common Core, obviously.
Yeah.
So Common Core changed the the methodology of how they were doing math, which I think was the disconnect between parents and students. Sure. Is this a new total methodology, or is it more aligned with core? Is it more aligned with an older thing, or is it a totally new method?
So it's not a totally new method. The next generation learning standards were what came after the standards of Common Core. And those next generation learning standards focused on specific mathematical practices that we wanted students to learn. And while there are still opportunities for students to learn different ways to solve a problem, which is really what Common Core focused on, and I think was the disconnect and what we didn't learn that children are learning now, that's still available, meaning teachers teach multi-ways, but more often than not, students default almost to the ones that we used as a more straightforward way. We provide opportunities for different students to learn different ways so that there's, different connections to the curriculum. So it is not a new standards or new ways of learning. Some of that is still incorporated, but it's a focus more on the mathematical practices, how we apply the learning. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you. Growing up, my parents didn't speak English, so they weren't able to help me with English and social studies, but they were able to help me with math. But then if you don't have mastery of the language and you're struggling with word problems, is there other tools available to support our non-English learners?
Yes, so one of the benefits to the updated Go Math program is a multilingual learner support program that's along with it. So the classroom teachers and our ENL teachers work together to support multilingual learners and their learning within the classroom. So there are updated opportunities, and then as our ENL students engage with their literacy learning, some of that relates to the word problem learning that takes place in mathematics. So our classroom teachers and our ENL teachers will teach keywords, will teach students how to identify specific ways of adding or subtracting, both in the literacy learning that promotes into the math.
Dr. Park?
Thank you for clarifying, 'cause I had a similar concerns that it's very much digitally led,
Sure.
and students who prefer paper method, I thought maybe they'll be at disadvantage. And what he brought up, I had a similar concern, but are we also at this time creating another level of gap with students whose parents are not digitally, or who are digitally challenged? So will there be more support from parents who can handle the computer well versus parents who can't really help them well?
So everything about the Go Math program that existed before this new digital platform is still in existence today. So students still have a workbook, they still bring their workbook home. The digital platform is a resource for students that they could engage with, but it's not a requirement for mathematical learning. So the Waggle is an additional student platform where they can go in, practice their skills, but it's not something that parents would have to engage with. The family room that I was speaking about before, that we walked through some of the families in the family workshop, we have our staff developer and our library media specialists, as well as our classroom teachers there to support any families that may want that. But we also provide any support if families are having trouble on paper or in person should they need it. So there's always opportunity for families to support their children. The majority of the work is on paper or in a book.
Ms. Dostrick?
I know we've gone on for a while, so I'll be super brief. presentation that we gave, is there a recording of it that parents can access?
So we have the slideshow online.
The slideshow, yes, but not
The
not the
recording-
actual, like,
We can put that on.
okay, that would
Yeah.
be helpful. And then one last quick question, and I just want to make sure I understand something. So we're not changing our instructional method, we're changing the program, the mathematical program. So we're not introducing a new way of having classroom teachers interact with the program or the Go Math. This is really just inherent in the curriculum itself, is designed to help students go more in depth. The reason why I'm asking is this comment from the fifth grader that we're being pushed to be more independent and not reliant on the support of our teachers. I just want to have a gut check that we're not asking students to be doing more of this on their own without teachers like we might be asking them in high school.
I think that's, I'm sorry.
That's it.
So to your first question, which was about the curriculum, remember we adopted or selected a new primary resource. Our curriculum is the New York State Learning Standards. And so what we're learning, what students are engaged with, what teachers are teaching remains the same because the next generation learning standards are the same. So our primary resource is what we use to deliver the learning standards. So there's just some updates to that. That's what we shared today. But the way in which students engage in mathematical learning and thinking is the same. As far as fifth graders, I think that is a step between fourth and fifth grade, is that push to be a little bit more independent. The teachers are not encouraging students to learn math on their own.
Bertolo.
And also, as far as language, and I know this is near and dear to your heart, but what about any unique learners or?
So the Go Math, the updated program, does have a richer intervention program alongside it that can be used as a tier 1, so support within the classroom for students who may need extra support, and also a tier 2, which lives in our learning center. So that that has been enriched as far as the Go Math updates program. And then Waggle, which is the student platform, is tailored, it's adaptive. So it's tailored to students as they do well, the material gets a little more challenging. As they need reinforcement, they're provided reinforcement for things that they still need support with.
Okay. Okay. Thank you again for the presentation. And
Thank
Dr.
you.
Rogers, would you like to say a few words?
Just again, I want to elaborate on one point about the broad arc of the shift of where the standards have been and where they were going and what Common Core was trying to achieve and the refinements that have been put in place with NextGen. The big transition that Common Core was attempting to achieve, and the reason why it looked unfamiliar, was it was a move away from computational mathematics to more of an understanding of the reasoning of mathematics. So looking for kids to have an understanding of why things work the way they did. So not adding together 58 and 42 and arriving at 100 because you knew to carry the 1 after you did the stacks, but recognizing that 58 plus 2 is 60 and 48 minus 2 was 40, and 60 and 40 were easier to add together than 58 and 42. So that conceptual math versus computational math was what we were trying to get. Some of the strategies that we used to try and teach math conceptually landed better than others. And so this refinement to NextGen kind of scraped out some of the less successful conceptual strategies and kept some of the more successful conceptual strategies. And as Dr. Wojcik said, a lot of what survived are things that are familiar because they are easier to grasp. So it's an ongoing process, but I think the achievement data speaks for itself, and obviously we'll be looking to see what happens with the achievement data going forward.
Okay, thank you. And next we'll have Mr. Steinberg to give us a presentation on the SIO Plus graduation pathways.
Okay, good evening, Dr. Rogers, Board of Education. Thank you again for having me to talk here about the SIO Plus program. As you recall, last month we did have a nice conversation about the shifting graduation requirements. So to start the presentation tonight, I just want to go back to a little bit what we spoke about last month and what the major transformations are going to be as the state moves to new graduation measures. So the idea that we're going to move from 3 diplomas to 1 is a key movement here, where right now we have 3 diplomas. We have our local diploma, our Regents diploma, and our advanced designation diploma. So those are our 3 major diplomas. In the transformation, we're going to go to 1 diploma. So that's going to take away that differentiation on the diploma. So we'll talk a little bit more in the next slide about what that really looks like and how we expect our students to engage with this piece of it as they pursue their diplomas. And the next big shift is going away from the credit requirements and the assessment requirements, meaning the Regents exams as a requirement for graduation, and moving into multiple means for demonstrating student proficiency, and then eliminating the requirement of the Regents exam for graduation. So those are going to be some of the major shifts we're going to see. So when we look at the proposed model, and we first start at the 1 diploma. The talk right now from the state is that advanced designation will move from a diploma to an endorsement and or a seal. So currently, in the current model, we have already a few endorsements. We have endorsements in honors, in mastery of science, and mastery of math, and there's a technical endorsement that's currently available right now that students can receive. So our anticipation is that when we make this transformation to the 1 diploma, majority of our students are still going to pursue the endorsements that are already available. So the take the advanced designation, for instance. That's an endorsement. In order to earn that endorsement, you have to take and pass 8 Regents exams, or you can pass 7 Regents exams and take a 4+1 pathway to do that. In order to get an endorsement, a diploma with honors endorsement on it, you have to have an average of 90 or greater on all of the Regents exams that you have taken. That is not going away. That is still going to be there. So our anticipation is majority of our students are still going to pursue that pathway, even on a single diploma. They're going to do that. Now, where the opportunity comes in is, why it's highlighted in red, is on the technical endorsement. The technical endorsement exists, but prior to us having the SIO Plus program, we did not have an option here in the high school for a student to earn that technical endorsement. So they weren't able to reach that technical endorsement with our programs. And when we first heard of the shifting graduation measures a few years back, we saw this as the opportunity, and that became the impetus to creating the SIO Plus program. Was now that program, which the state calls their technical endorsement, we call it our SIO Plus program, because we look at it as something additional that our students can now achieve. It's not a replacement, though, for the endorsements that already exist. It actually broadens the scope of the work and really widens the umbrella so that we can capture more students. So for the students that aren't necessarily pursuing their endorsements with honors or mastery or advanced designation, they have an option now to get the technical endorsement. So what does that look like for us? And our program, we know, again, is going to really empower our students' choice in their voice and their sense of self. And we'll get into that a little bit. And of course, our cross-cutting academic pathways and developing their human skills, and again, exploring their future interests. So we have just a quick review on that. So in the program, if we remember that for each one of the pathways, students will have to complete 3.5 credits of approved coursework. That's approved by New York State. Half of that credit must include a personal finance course, and then they must pass a industry standard exam. Once they complete all of those pieces, they will earn the State Education Department Technical Diploma Endorsement, which we call the SIO Plus pathway. Okay, so again, that's that one piece of that endorsement that if they choose to go in that direction. So currently, again, as discussed in the past, we have 4 approved pathways. We have our accounting, finance, pre-engineering, business management, fashion design, and merchandising management. And what's interesting is if we look on the left side of the slide, what we see is that these pathways that were originally approved live in a singular department. But the goal of the program is for it to be cross-cutting. And so as you see, the fourth pathway that was approved, the most recent one, is now crossing into 2 departments, where it's in family consumer science, it's also in business. And as we're developing more of these pathways going forward in our health services, pre-medical and education pathways, we're now bringing in more and more of these departments, okay, to allow for us to meet our students where they are. Not to push them into pathways, but to give them options so that we're meeting them where their interests lie. So that's kind of where we're sitting with the pathways right now. So the how of this and how do students get to identify the pathway that they may want to pursue or that they choose to pursue? We have the ability to disaggregate students' transcripts. We can analyze them, and we can look at those transcripts, and we can see where the natural choices have been. So if a student decides they want to pursue one of the SCD technical endorsements, again, what we call SIO Plus, that conversation will be happening in 11th grade. Will already have 2.5 years of coursework, almost 3 years of coursework under their belt that they have naturally chosen. At no point did anybody ask them to declare your pathway. There are programs in other school districts that are putting students in these pathways when they come into high school. They're saying to the student, you have to either be in the law school, the business school, the school of education, and then that's your school that you're in, right? And I liken that sometimes to, like the sorting hat in the Harry Potter, right? But we're not doing that. So our students are coming to school, they're picking their programs. They choose their program, but we have the ability to analyze their transcripts once they've been here to see where those natural choices are leading them. So we can have pointed conversations so they don't miss an opportunity to get recognized or to earn an endorsement upon graduation. So what does that really look like on the ground level? So here's an example of an 11th grade student. The student has not declared any pathway, and we have built out a dashboard in our systems that allows us to analyze the student's transcript. So for the business management pathway, as an example, the courses listed here are the required coursework for the student to be able to pursue this endorsement. So in 11th grade, if I was a guidance counselor, I would see this dashboard in front of me. And you can see on the right-hand side, green means I've completed the requirement for that course. Red means that has not been completed yet, and it's still to come. So what I'm seeing here is that for this particular student, for next year, I might say to them, hey, you've taken 3 credits in this pathway in business management already. And the conversation could look something like, is that something you're interested in pursuing? Because if you wanted to pursue the endorsement upon graduation, you would need to complete 1 credit of your college accounting and a half credit of your personal finance, and then take your industry standard exam. It's an information. We're just giving that information to the student and let the student make that choice. Empower the student to say, oh, you know what? I really do like that, and let me see if that's something I want to do. Or the student says, no, that wasn't my intent, and thank you, but I'm going to go and take some different coursework. So there's no pressure to do that. So again, it's just helping the student see where their choices might be. They may not be aware that that's where their interest lies, and when they see how their natural coursework plays out in that conversation, it might, a light bulb might go off for them, and they say, yeah, I do want to go there. So that's how that conversation happens. Now, we have a 12th grade class now, the class of 2025, that this is the first year where students can earn these endorsements upon graduation. And it's by choice. None of the seniors are aware of the program. So what we had done through our guidance department, we analyzed the senior class. And we looked to say, okay, so of the seniors, how many of them have completed the required coursework, and all they need is to take an exam, and if they pass the industry exam, they can earn that technical endorsement on their diploma. So when we do that, we use the same dashboard, and here you see I have all green. So this means this student has completed all the coursework. And there was a trigger this year for the guidance counselor now to turn to that student and offer them the opportunity to take the exam. Make them aware that if you just take the exam, then you can earn this endorsement. We had 40 students in the class that fell into this category, that just unknowingly took enough courses for a pathway. Of the 40 students, 39 decided that they would like to go ahead and take the industry exam. So the high school has now created a test day where these students can now take that industry exam, and upon passing the exam, it's pass-fail, they will now earn another endorsement on their diploma. So we have, the way it breaks down for us is we have 10 students taking the accounting and finance exam, we have 20 in the business management, and we have 9 in the pre-engineering. So we look at that as a measure of success to say that the students they were not aware of the Pathway program, yet now we're recognizing 39 students for their interest, and now they're going to earn something tangible that when they go out to school, they go into a workforce, wherever they go, they can always speak to the fact that they earn this endorsement. So in summary, really, what the program allows the students to do is that they're choosing whether they want to earn that SED technical endorsement upon graduation. So again, they're not being put into a school, they're not being asked to join a pathway. It is when they get to 11th grade, the conversation happens based upon the analysis. And there's no mandatory part of that. And our hope is, where the opportunity comes in, is that as we jog along the shifts in the graduation measures, this program now for our SIO Plus allows all our students an opportunity to earn an endorsement. So for those students that aren't going for the advanced designation, they're not going for the honors, the mastery, right? Or students that aren't going to be taking a Regents, because that's not something that they're going to choose to do to get to their diploma, this may be an opportunity for them, using the SAD's language, as a multiple means to demonstrating their proficiency in something. So we're not sure how that's going to go, but we're kind of predicting that this becomes a program that is going to help many of our students. So that's where the program, lies right now, and how we're seeing it fit in terms of the graduation measures work.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Steinberg, for your presentation. And then now, okay, one at a time. Okay, all right, so now we're just going to ask Mr. Steinberg questions only, because we have a discussion later, so I'll save everything else for the discussion, okay? Ms. Abramson, please.
Okay. So I have a few things. Do you want me to spat it out, or you want me to go one at a time?
However you want to do it.
Okay. Enjoy. I think there's a lot of exciting things to be said about Pathways, and they have a lot of opportunity. I have a lot of concerns about the movement. First, the timeline of adding new pathways seems to be extraordinarily long. We don't have a lot that encompass different things, like someone who wanted to try photography and engineering and business and just a jack of all trades, that I think Susan might have brought up last time. We don't have a lot that does a lot of cross-cutting, and I know the timeline is long. So how do we start doing that to make sure that we are still fostering kids trying things they never tried before, as opposed to saying, you have these 3 classes, you should take this class. So that was a concern, and it's something that we need to think about, I guess. If we have concerns with Pathways, with the state, what recourses do we have? Because if we're worried about how the curriculum is going to drive our students, as opposed to, we have literally created an environment where we have 1 million APs and electives and different things, so that kids are fostered in trying so many things before they go to college. And I feel like, and I know you're saying they have choice, and I totally hear the direction in your words, but even today with honor societies, there doesn't feel like there's a ton of choice, because if you would like to get to Business Honor Society, you need a certain number of credits. So they make choices based on that. If you want to do the business management pathway, you don't take the college real estate class because you have to take the college marketing class to get there. And it becomes the culture, as opposed to, you want to try real estate, this is your time. So I'm just concerned that we're not, that it's going to become so ingrained that there's not enough choice in the pathways to get to the requirements. So we have do we have choice in how we do course requirements for pathways? Like, what is choice of and versus what is required? I hope that was English. And is there any downside to the exam at the end? So if you choose to take the exam at the end of the pathway, can it hurt anything if you don't pass? Can colleges see that you took all the classes and didn't make the pathway? Is that a detriment? So I think that covers all my questions.
Okay, so I'm going to go backwards, if I can, and then I'll, no, they're all great questions. So let's just start with the last question. Is there would there be any negative effect, for taking the exam, not passing the exam, taking it multiple times? The colleges see that stuff. The answer is no. And that's because the students can take those industry exams as many times as they want until they pass it. Okay, and so once they pass it, the college won't see it. Right now, these things aren't transcriptable, so they don't show up on the transcript. It is something that if a student earns it, would be a seal on their diploma that they earned it, but you wouldn't know if a student didn't earn it. So it's not like getting recorded that they're in the pathway, and then they didn't complete the pathway, and then it has some negative effect on them. Okay, so there isn't a downside from that standpoint. All right. The upside to that is that when a student is putting their resume together, they can, they will share the pathway or pathways that they did earn, and might become a focus of supplemental essays and things along that line, talking about how they pursued an interest. So it will have some benefits, in that regard. We did, in our initial conversations and set up of the program, and we did talk to some university admissions officers. They shared with us that the benefit from that standpoint is that they would see that in the essay writing, that the student would have a stronger voice in terms of what their passion was and what their talking points were towards that. But other than that, it's not a transcript item as of right now. Okay, so that was the last question. In terms of the choice in the pathways, and it's a great question. I'm going to go back to the slide where we showed the pathways, because there's an evolution happening, to your point. So starting on the left-hand side with accounting, pre-engineering, and business management, those were the three first ones we went out with. We weren't sure how the process really was going to work. We wanted to get something out there, and we put them out. Now the fashion design and merchandising management took us a while. Everything on the left-hand side is New York State approved. From that standpoint, we have been talking with the state about permitting the local schools to create their own pathways and still allowing there to be a technical endorsement of some sort that goes along with that, a recognition. So what the state has told us up to this point is that we can create our own pathways, and I believe this is going to answer your question. So let's take health services as an example, where every student is taking biology. Every student has to take biology. If we make that part of the pathway, there's 1 credit every student's earning in that pathway. Every student has to take a half credit of health. If we put the half credit of health in there, now 1.5 credits of that pathway is in there. And then the other credits, we build a menu of choices that the students can pick which courses they want to add into that particular pathway. So it's not so defined. So I think your observation is correct that the original pathways are highly defined. And there's college level work that's going on there, so it's reachable by a certain type of student, not by every student. And what we're trying to be very intentional about in these development of the new pathways is ensuring that they are reachable by all of our students. So that's to that point. And so whatever that may be. So there's an evolution of the program that's occurring right now, and we're acutely aware of that. And again, it falls sort of underlying that jog alongside the graduation measures, so that when we get to 2029, we've kind of have this figured out. And so there is a huge menu of options for all the students should they decide to go down, any one of these pathways. And then the first question, I think I answered it maybe in this question, but the timeline and why it's so long. So the timeline to get approval from the state is long. The approval applications are due in October, and then the state has to approve it, and then we are not permitted to implement that program to the following school year. So if we put in a program like fashion marketing, we design and merchandising, we had state approved in October of 2024. But according to the state, we cannot implement that until September 2025. That means that the graduating class of 2026 would be the first class eligible for that endorsement by the state. So that's driven by the state, that's not driven locally by us. And again, to the point that we're trying to move the needle on allowing us as a district to create our local pathways, within certain guidelines, but we approve them. And as long as we can show we have a process to approve them, they're rigorous pathways, we should be able to endorse those on diplomas and move these things along a little bit quicker so that we are meeting the students where they are. Because we don't want to just say to them, you can only have accounting, finance, branch, and business. To your point, if you like photography, if you want to be an archaeologist, if you want to be whatever it is, we should be able to create that cluster of coursework, especially given the amount of courses that we're offering at the high school.
So I think we may have misunderstood your question. I understand your question to be, because there's 3.5 credits, those may displace other elective opportunities that students may have. Is that a better understanding of your question, number one?
Sorry, so there was two parts. First, because of the timeline, why can we start sending out like a million, like what's the limitation on sending out pathways? Why are we waiting? If it takes a long time, why don't we start implementing different things in different areas? And yes, I think that the pathways should not only be in clusters of areas, they should be encompassing different electives. And I also wanted to see if there were, when we create a pathway, you have requirements. Like if you want to look at the business and accounting one, for example, you have 2 required and a 3 that have a couple of choices. Is there a way, is that how they designed the pathway, or we designed it to that specification, and can we have more choices in there?
Yes, so we designed that within the state guidelines. So the state guideline tells us that you have to have minimally 3.5 credits, and those credits have to be taught by a CTE certified teacher, which is a business, FCS, or technology teacher, and that's according to the state guideline. Now, internally, we create a self-study team, it's called, that works to determine what coursework needs to be part of that path. And once those courses are determined, then we have to meet with an external review board. That external review board is made up of local industry professionals who review our curriculum, feed back on it, and make suggestions back to us the kind of coursework they think should be part of that pathway. So all of that does take time for it to happen, and it's a pretty lengthy application that has to be completed and then submitted to the state. So the work that happens internally to try to create that, because it's a new program, and it takes some time for new programs to get up and running. It takes 3-5 years, to really see a program get going. Right now, what happens is teachers engage in the conversations, we listen to students, and the kind of things they're looking to engage in. So it's hard for us just to throw a whole bunch of ideas out there because we have to go through this process, and that does take time. And that was my point about the local control over the creation of the pathways. If we can move the needle on that a little bit and gain a little bit more control over that piece of it, we could speed up that timeline in terms of what we're offering and how we're offering, so we're getting the program to the kids, a little bit quicker and with a lot more variety.
Dr. Park? So for next 4 years, I think it was, until this graduation degree is just 1 degree, we still have to do 4 years of English, 4 years of math, right? And after 4 years, when those English, math, science, and history is no longer required to have 4 years each, but reduced, right? That's going to happen in the future?
We don't have an answer to that. So, yeah, right. So if the state is saying it's going to redefine the credit requirement, it has not yet defined what it means by redefining the credit requirement. So right now, credit requirements are based on Carnegie units. They're based upon hours and minutes of study. The state is looking at alternative ways of defining that. We're not sure what that looks like yet.
If I'm assuming correctly, and the number of credits for those required science, math, that's taken bulk of students' days and periods are freed up, then this will be excellent. But for within that 4 years where our students still have to take those classes, I'm a little bit confused. If you go back to that slide where 11th grader, so this is an 11th grader who's taken 2 college courses, college marketing, college virtual enterprise. When did this person would have done 2 courses of college courses. When I'm looking at our schedule, there's not enough period to take those classes. Is it possible for 11th, 10th grader to take college courses?
Yes, yes, just like it's possible for them to take the AP courses. Each student is, schedule is very unique, but this is very possible that this can happen. And again, this is choice. This is a student who chose these courses, unaware of the pathway. They chose the courses. So this is one example of many, but yes, there is time in their schedule to be able to do this.
Ms. Falco?
Hi, so you had said that these pathways are only on the diploma, they're not on the transcript. So how do the students let the colleges know that they have accomplished these pathways? And then I have other questions, but I wanted to get that answer first.
It's a good question. Because by the time they earn the pathway, so let's take the seniors, the 39 seniors we talked about, by the time they take that exam, they're either in college or they have to get it to the college. So it has to go on sort of their resume because it's not on the transcript. The state is going to be releasing new transcripts in 2029, I think it is 2030, somewhere around there, which something like this may be included on the transcript, and it may shift how the program functions, right? And where we need some more of that flexibility to allow students to achieve the endorsement in a window of time that we can communicate the accomplishment with the college, right? So we don't have necessarily an answer to that right now, and some students will can actually complete some of these pathways at the end of their junior year, depending on the sequence of courses that they take. So it's not just a senior that's going to earn it. You might be able to earn this in your junior year, get it onto your resume, get it to the colleges in the application.
Okay. So for me, once it becomes known to the colleges, it's going to snowball into the kids being restricted in the choices that they have. So, for instance, I have an 8th grader, and I've had multiple people come up to me who've heard about these pathways and have said, or Business Honor Society or whatever, and have said, okay, my kid's interested in business or the pathway or whatever the case may be, and so they're concerned about taking all these classes because they want to make sure that they get that pathway. And so this now 13-year-old is now already setting themselves, and it's under the guise of choice, but they're already setting themselves on that path because they already feel pressure, and that's currently a real life situation of something that happened now, before it's even going to the colleges. They're already concerned about making sure that that's something else that they could check the box of. And so, and like for instance, like with this business management pathway, I have 2 kids in college, both of whom are in business schools at the college that they're at. They would not have qualified for, and they were in Business Honor Society, but for whatever reason, neither one of them chose to take virtual enterprise. So for those kids who were business kids and who were pursuing business in college, but chose never to take this virtual enterprise, they would never have gotten this management pathway unless they felt pressured to, and then they gave it up, but they gave up one of their other electives because they felt pressured to take the virtual enterprise to be able to check that box and now put it on their resume to go to college. And so I know it's under the umbrella of choice, but it's really not. There's so many things that we tell these kids, well, it's your choice. You don't have to take all these honors classes, or you don't have to take this specific area of content. But the reality is their choices are being limited by the pressure that they feel to check the box and accomplish these pathways for whatever they want to go to next. And I know that there's a lot of kids in college who are kind of having struggles because they don't know what they want to do, because they specialized, almost for lack of a better way of saying it, too early, and they didn't necessarily explore options in high school. And I'm super concerned that we're doing an enormous disservice to these kids by giving them the choice to follow these pathways, but they don't really have a choice, and that they're going to be we're doing them a disservice. And listen, I know the state, and it's not, I know you guys are doing the best, but I just, it makes me very nervous for
Yeah,
them.
and I hear it, and I appreciate the feedback, because this first iteration of these pathways, yes, they feel confining. They do, and that's why when we're developing and evolving programs, the feedback's important, so we can go back and say, all right, so we've got to look at something like this and say, it's too confining, and maybe we open up the pathway. So when we go back and we looked at the different pathways, and I talked about developing pathways, we might have to go back and look at business, let's say, and there's got to be a more flexible way for the students to engage in that, so it doesn't feel like, oh, wait a minute, let me work backwards from virtual enterprise and then build my schedule over the 4 years so I can get to that point. I get that, and that's not the intent of the program at all. To speak to the college piece, we have no indication that the colleges right now are going to be valuing necessarily these pathways. And what we do know right now is that the endorsements that exist, the honors, the mastery, that's already part of our culture, right? For good or for bad, but that's part of our culture. And so we do all kinds of things to sort of help our families and our kids understand the balance of a schedule and choosing what's in the best interest of you. We've had those conversations before, right? And here's this technical endorsement that's sitting there that we didn't have programming that spoke to that. And the type of student that might go after that technical endorsement, right, as we build these pathways, maybe better, more flexible, and so there's more room for everyone to take advantage of them, we'll have a wider group of students who can take advantage of something like that, and not tipping the scales to say, okay, all of your advanced designation students now are going to all run over here, to try to collect these technical endorsements. We don't have reason to believe that because the universities aren't shifting that way right now, right? So this is more about trying to build a program that's allowing our current students to engage in interests that help them, give them a little bit of direction for their future as to what program of study they might want to do, what career they might want to participate in.
Can I ask one?
Yeah,
So, like on the business manager one, because that's the one that's highlighted, college marketing is required and college virtual enterprise is required. Is there a reason why, those two are specifically required instead of having multiple options to check the box? For the choice of hospitality, the first one, there's a choice of 1, 2, 3, 4 different courses. So the likelihood of a child taking one of those is obviously higher. But with college marketing, college virtual enterprise, you have to take those two. So is there a way to expand that to provide, multiple choices for that? So that way they can check the box without taking those 2 courses?
Yeah, so what could really have happened on this pathway, and all these pathways, once they're approved, we have the ability to amend them with the state. We have to resubmit application. So something like this, in this conversation, you might say, well, we can make it college marketing or college virtual enterprise. One of the requirements by the state, though, is there has to be a dual enrolled course involved in the pathway, as the state has it laid out right now. So we have to have a partnership with the university on these. So that's why you're seeing college level courses in some of these pathways. And again, I go back to why we're pushing to get to the local part of it, because if we can create it locally, that's what's going to take some of these limitations off. Or the state has to say it doesn't have to be a college level course in there. So yes, we can make this more flexible by making it an or college marketing or college virtual enterprise, and that takes, in this particular pathway, it's requiring more than the 3.5 credits as well. So this pathway, I think, has 4 credits that are required, or 4.5 credits that are required here. So you can take this, in this situation, you can lower that barrier, you can put more choice, and that's what we're learning as we're developing these pathways. So we're learning as we're doing this, and why, frankly, I very much appreciate the feedback and the thought that's being put into this, because that's going to help us grow in the next iteration of this, whatever it's going to look like. So that by the time we get to the point where we really got to lean on a program like this to ensure that all of our students have all the opportunity in the world to earn a New York State graduation diploma, that we have this program right. Okay, and this is really the first year that it's in place.
Right.
So I'm listening to everything that's being said, and I really do appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you for all of your work. I know how hard it is. I know we kind of put you on the spot, so sorry about that.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Dave. I'm kind of going to piggyback on Lynn and on Susan and Shawnee's points, because I feel like we have a lot of pressure on our students to check off the boxes. If everybody is not taking the most advanced and checking off every single box, then there's a stigma that they're not doing everything they need to do, versus where I feel like you want this to be like a great opportunity to learn and say, wow, I am interested in this. I had no idea that I'm in art class and I'm really good with my hands. Maybe I can be a surgeon. And there's all these other exploratory where we don't have time for that. And I kind of think that that's going to add more to our mental health issue. I kind of agree with Lynn that we kind of need to have more options. For instance, like I remember a couple of years ago, we had the fabrication machine that we bought. And we went down to the shop class, and I remember sitting there and they were demonstrating it to us. And I asked them, I said, well, who does the programming? Do we use like AutoCAD? And the professor was like, yes, the students. So I remember saying to him, I said, you could probably get a job today with those skills, not even go to college. So I guess my point is are we looking at other pathways for students that may be manufacturing or other trades or something else is going to be demonstrated on here where they can prove their proficiency in that area. Especially adding also from both ends, from kids that might not be going to college, but then also other emerging areas that don't exist today. And I don't know if that's under pre-engineering or AI or any of those other things. Because I'll tell you as a parent that's went through the whole Sasset School District, and my child went to college and graduated college, it just seems like we're just checking off boxes versus like I'll bring up a question. I said, hey, have you guys read any good books in college to my daughter's friends? And they said, you don't understand. We don't have time to do that. We have so much work. We just have to get through the course load. So you're like, where is the learning and the love of learning and exploring happening? And I kind of feel like we're starting off so young that we have to pick something, just like how we're doing with sports, where you have to pick a sport and you can't do anything else because everybody has 10,000 hours. So you can't change midstream because now you're at a complete disadvantage.
So, thank you. So, we're not asking kids to pick anything. We're not putting them in a lane. We're not putting them in a pathway. They don't have to choose anything ever if they don't want to. They don't have to. The conversation that the counselor will have with the student in 11th grade, right? So this is, would be this time of year in 11th grade, using our dashboard is to say, hey, did you even realize that you have this opportunity, should you want to have it? No push, there's no pressure, there's no collecting of these things, because there's no, the only value to that really is the recognition that we can provide to the students to say, hey, I see you. I see your interest, and I want to support it, right? And what we're trying to do is build these programs in such a way, right? You could see it's tricky because we're coming at this from the educational standpoint that if a student is doing something they like to do and an interest, they're going to feel better, simply, right? I mean, it's going to address the mental health issue. Not fully, but it will help. As opposed to coming from the other end of it and say, hey, you're a 9th grader, you want to be an engineer? You got to take this engineering pathway, and here's the coursework you're going to take. I mean, we don't want to, put that kind of pressure on our kids at all. So we want to have that choice there, and we're working towards that. In terms of recognizing students' skills that they're developing, the employability, so each one of these pathways actually has an employability profile that has to be filled out so that when the student finishes it, it actually talks about what the student's able to do. That employability profile stays with that student. They could walk around with that. In addition to that, which we had discussed in previous presentations, I didn't include it in this one, but is the ability for students to earn micro-credentials within the courses themselves. So those micro-credentials that they can earn, they're learning skills in whatever the course is. So they might be learning design thinking. They might be learning how to use Excel. And there are micro-credentials out there that the student would take an exam within the course that they're learning this skill, and now they have that micro-credential that follows them around for the rest of their lives, right? And that's recognized by industry. So to your point, somebody might work on on some sort of machinery and get a credential on that machinery, could walk into an employer and say, here's the credential. We have worked very closely in the engineering pathway on things like that with Arizona, who's one of our neighbors here, and they were gracious to work on our external review board with us, and their engineers talked to us about those things. And so all of those points is a yes, and that's what we're trying to build. And we have to build it with the fidelity and with the right frame of mind on this. We do not want this to be another, I have to have this. This is not a gold coin. It's not intended to be a gold coin. It's actually intended to allow our students to see the purpose in the work that they're doing. We all grew up with the question, why do I have to take math, right? Okay, no offense, I know you're a CPA, but you know, but we all kind of grew up with that question, right? And now the idea of a program like this is say, wait a minute, now I could see math in this potential career. I could see why I'm taking social studies. I could see why I'm taking this course. And that kind of understanding for a high schooler is going to increase their engagement. It will increase, if they can see the purpose in the future, they will be more engaged in the present, and it won't and the hope is that it won't be just the get to get something else, right? It'll mean something. It'll have purpose for them. That's our hope with the program. So year one, right? In year one, you know, we're gonna again jog alongside graduation measures. We're gonna listen. We're gonna learn. We're gonna shift. Yep.
Okay. You want to add something? Okay. Ms. Ostrick?
We're having a discussion after this, right?
I was hoping you said discussion for later, because it's scheduled for later.
Okay. So I'll defer.
You want a discussion, so save that for later. Ms. Levitan?
How did you arrive to the 4 currently approved pathways here, right? So what is the process in determining which pathways we would like to do right now? Is it based on the courses offered here at Syosset now to our kids? Are we following demand, so to speak? Are we following the state sort of communicating what endorsements and pathways the state would like to see? And also, when we're putting them in a pipeline, again, how do we arrive to which pathways to offer next? And also, do we evaluate those how often would we do that? For example, before I see here fashion design and merchandising management, but nowhere here I see political science, public administration. Like, how do we know what to add and what? I'm just, confused how that works.
So
You can elaborate.
we have at the high school, we have our work-based learning coordinator who runs our work-based learning program, runs our internship program, is also a business teacher, and oversees this program right now at the high school. He also oversees the self-study team. So the self-study team is comprised of teachers, students, administrators, guidance counselors. We have E&L teachers on there, special ed teachers on there, so that that group of people, that self-study group, is through the conversations with the students, is where these pathways are surfacing. So these initial pathways surface because we know we have a lot of students interested in these particular career pathways. So in the inception of the program was we can capture students and recognize these students for already doing this work. And then the pathways that are in development, the health services, pre-medical, and education, that's all coming from what we're hearing from the kids. And what we're trying to do within those, the challenge we have in those is because we have to develop those locally right now, given the confines of the state regulations around how you develop a pathway, meaning the pathways have to be taught by CTE certified teachers. That's a business teacher, that's FCS teacher, and that's a technology teacher. So if we want to include other departments, social studies, English, science, world languages, those would not be counted towards the state. We would have to then approve them and then provide the endorsements locally. So that's some of the work that we're trying to do and advocate for what we're looking to do, so we can offer all of those other sorts of pathways, and then get them out there quickly, as opposed to, and using the coursework, to your other point, that we already have. So taking the coursework that we have and clustering what's there.
Okay, questions only? Okay, Dr. Park.
I think it's wonderful, this pathways, and it's amazing that we already have these courses prepared, and we can just roll it out just like that. So I think it just testifies how well we are doing as IASIT. But in our, how many graduating class at 2025?
In the class itself, close to 600, I'm not sure the exact
600,
number.
about 600, right? So SciIS is very competitive, and everybody knows that. And this small group of, selected group of people, 39, so it's about 6-7% of the graduating class is receiving this special pathway certification. And this creates this pseudo higher status that puts pressure onto students. And this doesn't need to be at this point, because there aren't too many pathways available, so not getting pathway CO certification when they are graduating 2025, 2026, it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean that they are less than those people who are getting the certification. So what is your plan in action to decrease or eliminate that image? Because just from us, we are thinking of this pathway as something that's superior, but that's actually not. It's something that's available, and as more pathways become available, there will be more students getting this pathway certification. So what will be your plan to decrease or eliminate that image?
So I want to kind of go back sort of to first principles here. So these endorsements already exist for the state. So as you know, I was the superintendent of Nassau BOCES prior to coming here. Every student who graduates from a BOCES program has a technical endorsement on their diploma. So there are some students who could graduate with a technical endorsement on their diploma without the need to go to BOCES. So that would be creating programs of our own. So BOCES offers a number of technical programs in some very specific areas. And kids who go to the BOCES program, they go for 2 years, so they already are specializing in something. So this model is not new. This is familiar. And I don't know that someone looks at the technical endorsement on the diploma now and says, this is better, this is worse. You went to BOCES because you're interested in medical assisting, and that's what you wanted to pursue, and you got to spend your time doing it, and you're going to get a technical endorsement on the diploma for that. Or you want to be a physical trainer, or you want to do automotive or culinary. There are all these options at BOCES, and they have other technical endorsements now for digital game design, for example. So they're branching into new areas of interest for students, and they're building their own pathways at BOCES that lead to technical endorsements around these kinds of niche interest areas. And kids have to give basically 2 years, half day, to BOCES in order to earn those kinds of things. But they want the program, they want digital game design, and they're willing to make the trade in their schedule of the time that's necessary to get there. So if a student wanted to earn a technical endorsement without needing to leave the high school, we can build some pathways that lead to that technical endorsement. And we can think about, well, okay, here are the kinds of things that are offered at BOCES. What are the kinds of things that we could offer here? And we're starting from the premise of, well, what are the things that we already offer here? And what do they cluster around? And how could we describe those clusters? So it is no surprise to me that a lot of the initial ideas came out of our business department because they are entrepreneurial. I mean, it just stands to reason. But we're looking at the opportunity here and saying, okay, that they've been entrepreneurial, they've wanted to pursue this, and they've kind of done the work of showing us how to get one of these through the state and approved. But the critique that you're making of the program is that, okay, well, that's great in business, and if you happen to have this cluster of courses, this will work for you without changing your schedule much. But we can broaden this program, but I don't know that we need to broaden it. I don't know that we need to approach it as though it is such an essential credential that we have to wrap every course into it somehow, because to miss this credential will leave you aside. I think instead, the way I'm thinking about this, not in terms of next year, but in terms of 2029, 2030, the state is saying that they're going to deprecate the value of the Regents exam as the sole means of demonstrating proficiency against a skill. So that means that there are going to be other ways to demonstrate proficiency against a standard that the standard's not going to change, just the way of assessing your progress towards the standard will change. So the pathways look to me like a likely place that the state will say either or. You could take the assessment or you can demonstrate proficiency through this. So we'll need some experience with this first in order to show that it's as valid an assessment as the Regents exams are a valid assessment. So I know you wanted to kind of hold off on discussion for a second, but I just want to offer my synthesis of what I've heard and what we've had this conversation as an instructional cabinet, as a team, about the tensions, the opportunities, but then the cost, and then therefore the tensions. And so here are my sort of 5 takeaways of things that we need to think about as we continue to iterate. The first is to go to the minimum number of credits in each program. So one pathway has 4.5 credits, but if we can get the same pathway with 3.5 credits, it frees up more time in a schedule for things like electives. The second is this conversation about having more substitutions for the courses that are in there. So if you can sub one college course for another college course, again, it just opens up opportunities for students. I do think that we should try and find ways to sweep more electives into the pathways. But as Mr. Steinberg points out, one of the things that right now is a little confining about the way the state has designed this program is the requirement for a business FCS or tech teacher to be in the pathway, because there might not be any of those 3 certifications in political science or public administration, as Ms. Levitan said. So I think, and we have been asking the state to consider offering more flexibility in the teacher credentials that can lead to a pathway. But right now the state is very, they're very narrow in their focus on credentials, and they need to widen their lens in terms of focusing on the kids and not the credentials. I think we can build with that more pathways in different interest areas with more flexibility from the state. And then the 5th point would be, I think one of the tasks that's ahead of us is to get clearer on articulating the standards that each one of these pathways demonstrates achievement in, so that we can start to articulate how we see these as substituting for Regents exams eventually. So, you know, these are my 5 senses of where we're going to iterate this program in order to mitigate some of the concerns that we hear about stress. Because if this is truly an interest-based program, kids will do it because it appeals to them, not because they feel they're being chased into it. So I think if we can work on these 5 points, we'll get to a place where we build more of these pathways. Kids feel less constrained to pursue the narrow number of pathways that exist now. The pathways help a student that struggles with a high-stakes assessment, that's a paper and pencil, focused recall kind of assessment, and gives them other options. And it just adds to the existing suite of technical endorsements that already exists through BOCES with some of our own. So we'll still have kids that want to have technical endorsements and still want to go to both these programs, that'll be great too.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Steinberg,
Okay, thank you.
for the presentation. Okay. We have no legislative items, and we're going to move to our discussion items. And Dr. Park has attended the budget, the Nassau BOCES budget presentations, and I know that she reported last month, but she has a few more items to update the board. And
Jack wanted to.
oh, you want to ask?
You know, I was just wondering why you wouldn't just finish the discussion and then go back to BOCES stuff after.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, go ahead. All right, so, okay. So we will do that discussion, okay? So Dr. Park, go ahead.
Okay, so BOCES budget meeting, the total budget proposed for 2025-2026 is $524,522,000, and the administrative operations budget is $27,877,000, and it's about 4.4% increase from last year, and that's the part that we're going to be voting on next month. And it is at $126.52 per awada, and that is 0.79% increase, which is the lowest increase in last 10 years. And the cost increase for the next school year, it's same as ours: health insurance, the ERS, TRS increase, and they will also use their reserve to offset that a little bit, $5.5 million in total, $4 million from ERS and $1.5 million from TRS. And Long Island High School for Art will be included in the 3-year average billing model, along with Barry Tech and GC Tech, and it will simplify the billing process, and it will reduce the bill by about 10% for the Long Island High School of Art students. So just to put numbers to that tuition, it's going to be $15,693 per student for those special schools. And they have 3 positions. 2 of them, Fran and Rob, BA, they submitted their resume to run again, but the 3rd person, Ron, he hasn't done that yet. And if there are more than 3 people running, the Meet the Candidate Forum will be April 10th, and the budget vote is April 23rd.
Thank you, Dr. Park. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Park on the Nassau BOCES budget? Okay, all right, and then the next item is the Nassau BOCES Board of Trustee nominations, and Dr. Park already shared with us that we have 2 candidates this year seeking re-election, and our board has historically supported nominations for members we're familiar with, and I'd like to recommend that we do the same this year. And the first candidate, B.A. Sean, has been a tremendous asset not only to BOCES but to public education as a whole. And as the former Area 11 director, he's highly dedicated and well respected. And I've had several encounters with him through the NISBA events, and I strongly recommend we nominate him. And the other candidate is Fran Langsner, and she has served on the BOCES board since 2013 and previously spent about 12 years on the Great Neck Board of Education.
So I don't know if anyone wants to share their inputs about these people or these two candidates or anything else. Otherwise, I do recommend that we nominate these two candidates. Okay, all right, so we do have a resolution prepared later, so we'll vote on that. Okay, and now going back to Mr. Ostrich, SIO Pathways.
So I'll admit to a significant amount of confusion. So I thought that these pathways were designed to be the next generation of CTE sort of education and not sort of high order college preparation, honors student competitive academic pathways. Do I not understand what the purpose of these pathways are, or is it evolving, or is there just a little bit of confusion?
The answer is they can be both, but don't have to be both. So, to give you an example of a student who's in a medical assisting program in BOCES, happens to be the child of two physicians, planning on being a physician himself, decided to take that program because he thought that if he doesn't enjoy patient care, he should learn it earlier rather than later after having invested 8 years in school. So, but taking physics and chemistry and bio and all of the things back at the home school, and then taking medical assisting at the BOCES program. So he's since graduated, but he has a technical endorsement on his diploma for his BOCES program, and he's also pursuing the most rigorous of classes that his home school has to offer. So those two things are not mutually exclusive, and the arc of progress at BOCES has been to take career and technical education and make it more academically rigorous. And the arc here has been to identify where there are career clusters that exist alongside our academic programs and identify those as clusters that students can look at and see industry credentials that might assist them in getting better at one of the tasks in the industry, or might be a CTE endorsement alongside their honors diploma. So right now we have lots of kids who have Regents diploma with honors and a CTE endorsement. Those two things I don't see them as mutually exclusive, but they don't necessarily have to both be the same goal for a student.
Sure, I don't want to argue that they're mutually exclusive, but in general, the proportions that we're talking about of sort of overlap between those things, I wouldn't, again, I may be guilty of confusion, I wouldn't think it would be enormously high. I would think that would be sort of slices of it and not high percentages of what we're talking about.
Is your question, what does the Venn diagram overlap look like between those two?
Yeah, I'm just confused about, there seems to be like a really strong aversion because this is going to turn into like an academic free-for-all competition, and I didn't understand that was the purpose of what we were doing. Maybe I asked the question another way. What are we trying to accomplish?
Right, so I'll return to the, since it wasn't mic'd, what are we trying to accomplish? And what we're trying to accomplish is identifying opportunities for kids to earn credentials that we think might have some value, maybe to colleges, but more likely in the world of employment. So these micro-credentials, for example. So Mr. Rotolo was talking about the CNC cutting machine that's in the lab and it has to be programmed by computers. The students learn AutoCAD and then they learn, there is an industry credential that they can earn that says they don't just have basic understanding of AutoCAD, they're actually certified at level 1. So that credential has meaning in the industry. They may just want to get the micro-credential. They may think that there's some value in having a technical endorsement on their diploma if they're going to go to, let's say, as a college, one of the Ag and Tech programs in the state, where that technical endorsement does have value. SUNY Farmingdale, for example, is one of the Ag and Tech schools. So, again, the pathways are going to be as varied as the kids, and the goals for why they pursue any one of these things is also going to be as varied as the kid. In addition, we are trying to, Mr. Steinberg uses the metaphor of jogging alongside the regents as they revise these standards, but in some ways we're taking a little bit of a shot in the dark to try and understand where we think this is going to evolve to, so that we're better prepared when that happens, that we're sort of arriving there first. So some of that is trying to calibrate alternatives to Regents exams as means of demonstrating proficiency, as I said before. That's the second goal in these programs. The third is we've built these programs around clusters of courses that students already tend to group on their transcripts, which is why 40 students unknowingly had already completed a pathway, because these are just sort of typical groups of courses. So recognizing that, it's a way for students to have the credential that they really earned just appear on their diploma, and it wouldn't have appeared otherwise had we not identified this for them. So I think it's all of those things, and I also think it's going to evolve. So this may push how we design CTE programs as it continues to evolve. I think, certainly this discussion for me accelerates the need to try and identify more pathways in more diverse departments, so that there are more options scattered across more interest areas for kids. I think we have to have a 1.0 version in order to see where to take the 2.0 version. So I think this has been a healthy critique of the 1.0 version, and some worries about what it might, if it goes wrong, what it might look like is more pressure for kids. If it goes right, what it might look like is kids being able to say, I did some work towards this thing that I'm really interested in, and I've got something to show for it.
Ms. Elko? You done?
Sorry, he wasn't only talking.
I know, but do you have any more
Answer your
questions?
question.
Yeah, I mean, I drew a different conclusion, which was, why don't we just plan and not institute it yet and wait till we have more developed criteria and the state is further along, and instead of instituting a program where we're doing credentials, why don't we just program plan alongside it and then give credentials when we're done and we know where we get to? I'm just not understanding what the instituting of the program 1.0 gives us, as opposed to just paper creating it and understanding and jogging alongside, and then when we get to the end, we know what we need to do.
Jack, what's your concern about starting it early? And I've heard that from a couple of people, but I'm curious what your concern is.
The way I understood what we're waiting for is where the state is ultimately going to reach, right? So why are we stepping ahead of them before they get to where they're going to, and having a credential that we're issuing until they get there? I've lost the plot on what we're trying to accomplish by issuing extra credentials.
Maybe I'm suffering from the same confusion Jack is suffering from. Dr. Rogers, was this implemented, or at least conceived, prior to the state making the change? I feel like I remember the concept of SIO Plus, or whatever its predecessor was, being talked about before the state started to push this out.
Yeah, the state relaxed the rules on building these pathways, and so we started taking advantage of that before the Blue Ribbon Commission released its report. So through the conversations that we'd seen the Blue Ribbon Commission having over time, we have some sense of how those conversations are evolving and where they're going. These things are on parallel paths, and as both have evolved, again, the metaphor of jogging alongside, we see how this thing that we're working on actually is going to serve us well in the future we anticipate is going to come with new graduation requirements. So it makes sense to not just build it in theory, but to build it in practice, because seeing how students react to it, whether the programs work, whether they generate student interest or not, what students identify as stressors or values in the program. All of that informs the evolution. Certainly, conversations with parents inform the evolution as well. So we deny ourselves all of those feedback opportunities if we only do it theoretically. I think I'm not sure that any of us can predict exactly where this is going to go, but my feeling is that this is much more likely to be a resource than to be an impediment. And so it seems like a worthwhile place to invest our energies going forward.
Ms. Valkov.
There we go. Okay. So however we can use it to help the kids who are struggling with the Regents diplomas, or to help kids become more marketable, who are maybe not going to college or maybe not doing a four-year degree, or whatever it is that they're doing, that it's going to help them, you know, be able to be more marketable and help their future. I think that's exactly what we should do, and that's amazing, and we should do that. And for what Jack was saying, I think that that's one of the things that this is being used for, which is wonderful. The problem is that when it becomes something that is now going to the college as an accomplishment or as something that you accomplish, and the kids now feel pressure to be able to put that endorsement or seal on their college, you know, application, or however it's going to be shown to the colleges, it becomes like, did you take the most rigorous course load? Did you take the most APs? Did you take the most honors? It becomes that, and that inherently puts pressure on the kids, whether we want to say it or not. And so if there's a way, and I don't know how this would work in terms of the state requirements or where the state ends up, but if there's a way that it only ends up on the child's diploma versus the college application, I think that helps to eliminate the pressure that you feel, because I think most of the pressure comes from those kids who are applying to college and want to put it on their application to say, look, I accomplished this because I was expected to accomplish this, versus if it's on their diploma, if they're not going to use it or they don't need it for their college, then it puts less pressure on them, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Karen. I don't remember if it was in 10th grade or 11th grade, we used to do those, like a Myers-Briggs personality assessment that would say, fill out this 100 questionnaire, and you should be a teacher, you should be a judge, you should be a social worker. So I kind of feel like we're not shooting in the dark for this stuff. There's other tools that we have in place that are kind of guiding our students to say, hey, maybe you took the assessment test, and do we do it in 11th grade, Dave? It is 11th grade? 10th and 11th, right? So I think by that point you start having an idea, wow, like I really want to go in STEM, or I really want to go to the arts, but we're not just doing this one thing. We have a whole bunch of other tools that are kind of directing our students to say, hey, I'm interested in this pathway. Now, to delay it, I would say, since it's in place, and there is obviously the business schools already set up, why lose that opportunity for those students who are really interested in that and can get the credits? And I go back to what I had said before about taking AutoCAD. Like, there's certain little skills, like, that will get you hired just because you can do AutoCAD. Like, that's a big deal, just to be able to have some of these, just to be able to program in a certain language. I had spoken to a college student recently, and they did biochem. They went to Stony Brook. They were going the research end. When they started to interview for research positions, They said, do you know how to program? So that person was like, I didn't take any programming classes. I was too busy taking labs. So that was like another thing where there was this other piece that now it's like, hey, I got to learn how to program now in some of the new languages, which no one had said, by the way, you need to program if you're biochem. So I think a lot of these little things, plus it's good to just, it's like learning to be a lifeguard. You learn something and you have a skill forever. It's like, we are trying to learn here. You know? This is kind of the point that we're doing here, so.
All right, thank you. Ms. Koshia?
Thank you. Based on Mr. Steinberg's presentation, I just want to make sure I understand that the timeline of this really wouldn't affect college applications, because college applications are submitted, let's say, you know, the beginning of 12th grade. So by the time you actually take this test to show that whether or not you have achieved this mastery, you've already been accepted to the colleges that you've applied to, and you pretty much have chosen your college. Am I correct in that timeline?
Students will earn the endorsement in their senior year. That's because to take the 3.5 credits and to have a balanced schedule as we promote for high schoolers, we don't want students coming in and trying to get this done in 2 years, right? So 3.5 credits is a reasonable pathway to earn credits over 4 years and then to take the exam. So like the class of 2025, those 39 out of 40 students that decide to take the exam are taking it in April. And by the time those results come back, those students are already in college. So it's not about, you know, collecting, again, as I said before, like collecting coins to try to build a transcript to compete with your neighbor to get into a better school, right? It's really about recognizing the student for the interest that they followed and then giving them something tangible that they've earned already, that they can walk away with upon graduating from high school. So that when they do go for a job or they want to put it on a resume of some sort, they can speak to that it's a skill, that it's more than, you know, I know when we grew up, it was, oh, I'm proficient in Excel, right? And everybody put that on their resume, but there was no official seal as to what did that mean. You claim that, but if you get an endorsement, you get a credential, now it's industry backed, right? And industry will recognize that, so it has that strong meaning to it.
Thank you, because I'm only seeing the benefit of this if a child has already, let's say they decide in high school, I think I want to do something in the business world. They're going to take these credits that are offered to them, whether they be part of their electives or part of a pathway, so to speak. They're going to earn this anyway. They're going to take that test. It's not going to affect colleges and college applications. It may help them write an essay for the colleges, but it's not going to affect them as far as being accepted into a college or looking better than one student to another because of this accreditation, because of the timeline. When I had sat through a presentation probably about a year or so ago with one of the business teachers at the high school, I was under the impression when there was only those 3 business pathways that the reason why the business department had started to implement this was because they found that it would make students more confident in themselves going into their major as business students, because it would give them more of a background to start with their classes at the college level. But also, if they were, let's say, not to pursue college, which some of our kids may choose not to pursue college after, that accreditation allowing them to, saying that they have that mastery and they can do AutoCAD or all these things that we're mentioning, would open up doors for these children after high school without having attended college. It would give them a leg up, let's say, to pursue like a resume and just start a job after school as opposed to college, which I thought was really phenomenal. The fact that we're building on it and now saying, well, you can actually do that if you're not looking at the business world and you're looking at medicine, you're looking at education. Here's another way for you to do that, to earn these accreditations and then move forward. Maybe you want to work and developing, I don't know, starting a new camp for children. Now you have this accreditation, I don't know, I'm just, throwing this out there. Just offers, in my opinion, different ways for kids to leave high school having achieved something else besides their high school diploma, which is fabulous, but gives them a leg up in the world, in my opinion. But also, let's just say as a kid, you're like, I think I want to teach. So I have this opportunity in this Pathways program. I'm going to take these classes. But at the end of the Pathways program, maybe you say, you know what, I thought I wanted to teach, but now that I've worked with these little kids in this program at the school, I've now found that I don't think education's really the right way to go. Now they enter college and they say, well, I'm not going to apply for the education program because I know that's not what I want to do. But, my second choice was business, so I think I'm going to start that pathway in the college world. In my eyes, you've already saved that kid 2 years or whatever it is in college of taking these credits and realizing at 20, gee, I think I'm going to change my path now. I'm not saying that's going to happen for all children. I'm just saying it's an opportunity. I think we have to look at this. I understand everybody's point. I hear it. But I'm looking at what are the positives of this, because it has been a positive in the business department as per that, what I've sat through with that teacher, which was great. But I think we're opening the scope, because not all kids want to be part of business. So I happen to think this is great. I think there's a learning curve here. We're going to find things that don't work with this, and we'll have to change it and make it evolve, get feedback from everybody and things that we normally do. But I'm seeing a lot of positives in this, so.
Okay, thank you.
I think Mr. Steinberg had something. Did you want to respond?
Do you want to say something?
I just want and when you're mentioning about a student who might try a pathway, some of these pathways might eventually include internships and things along that line as well, get them real-world experience doing something. And in our research for the program, we did visit other schools that have similar programs, and we met with students who were in those programs at other schools. And two of the students that we did meet were in an education pathway, and they were doing internship hours within the district and going to the elementary schools and teaching. And these two students, the passion that they found, they were interested in education, but when they shared their experience with us, and they were so excited now to go off to college and study to become a teacher, they felt so good about their decision, the confidence, the self-esteem, all of that. So I think just to that point, we have seen that. We've heard that directly from students who have participated in similar programs in other districts.
And Dave, right? We went to the New York State Conference where COMAC presented their schools, and then they had students that tried certain pathways and said, we heard from the students that said, we're not interested in that pathway, and ended up changing it and saved them, correct?
Right, and it helps them to identify where their interests might be. They think they might like something, they try, they realize they don't. Yep.
Ms. Starkov and then Mrs. Abramson.
Lisa, I fully agree with you that if that's how it works, that's fantastic. But I'm just confused, because when I asked, I want to rewind the tape to see what your answer was. When I asked if it was going to be used on the college application, I thought there was a different answer. I thought it wasn't that it wasn't clear that it wasn't going to be used on the college application. I specifically asked that question during the presentation, that how it would be used, and I thought either you said you weren't sure how it was going to be used, or that it could possibly be used, because my understanding was that it was not clear that it was not going to not be used on a college application.
So currently, the endorsements are not put on the transcript. Right, so currently they're not being put on the transcript. The state, in this transformation of the graduation requirements, is talking about a redesigned transcript for a New York State high school student. They haven't said what that looks like. So my comment was probably something along the lines of, is it possible that at some point it can wind up on a transcript? I don't know. Right, or an application, a student might choose to put something like this down, but the reality is, and I think this was to an earlier point, that by the time a student gets to a point where they're going to be taking the industry exam, they're going to be in the second semester of their senior year for the most part. So at that point already, they've already submitted materials, right? So they might have used the experience to draw from when speaking about something in an essay or an interview or something along those lines.
Will all pathways have to take an industry exam at the end of, or will they be able to achieve the pathways before without an industry exam? Or put prospective pathway, or you know how they do for honor societies. They don't always get the honor society before the applications go out, but they put on their application prospective National Honor Society membership, which essentially is the same thing. So if they say prospective pathway, then it's not working the way Lisa had listed as, then it will be on people's applications.
So if we have that conversation at the end of the 11th year programming, 11th grade programming year, there's no commitment to the pathway. So there's not a mechanism where the student's going to say, I'm committed, or I'm declaring a pathway, that's not what's going to happen. The conversation will look very much as if I was your guidance counselor and I showed you the dashboard and said, hey, did you know that if you took one more credit and that exam, you can get the endorsement, right? I think we'd want our students to talk about that experience because it does speak to them, being focused and having a passion and trying something, and then speaking to what that experience was and what did they learn, right? Did they learn that they really do enjoy that subject area, or did they realize, it's not so much for me, I'm going to try something else. So that's our hope in how it's going to work. And just like everything else, we have to be very intentional, and it's why the progress of the program is slow. It's slow because we do need to put some stuff out there, test it out, get some feedback, and then go back and say, okay, how do we need to shift this so it's going to really meet our need?
First, you mentioned something about 4.5 credits versus 3.5 credits. There are pathways that are 3.5 credits, is that correct?
Yes.
So let me start by saying I agree with Lisa. I think I've said it a few times. I see there are huge benefits to this kind of programming. I have a lot of concerns that I think that we need some sort of, is there a recourse? I guess the first question is, as we're starting to implement things, is there a recourse where we can go back to the state and say, this is detrimental in some ways, or this is working, or this is totally not okay?
The answer is yes to that question. And Dr. Rogers and I think it was a little over a year ago, had a conversation with the state specifically about this. We got on a conference call and we talked about the confining nature of New York State's program here, in that it's only allowing the CTE teachers to teach within this program. So that limits our ability to create new pathways and to include elective coursework, some of the other core coursework within these pathways, because we are limited to FCS, technology, and business. So we've started those conversations. The state has put focus in the graduation measures on increasing its attention to CTE and what that might look like. We don't know what that might eventually evolve to become, but yes, there are mechanisms, and we are tuned into that and having those conversations.
And the last thing. And a half, it's very doable for a lot of these kids and the way they function in our high school, to have it done by 11th grade. Are you not going to let them take credentials in 11th grade? Because what I foresee in the really ambitious, I need my credentials, I need my pathways kid who's applying to college, is they're going to double down on not having lunch and double down on following the pathway and getting as many done by 11th grade, especially the 3.5 credit ones, so that they have it on their resume, transcripts, and so on, and tests.
So with any program that we offer to our students, they have to make a decision of what's going to be a balanced program for them. So whether it's a SIO Plus program, it's APs, it's a dual enrolled SUPA, it's any of those courses however they plan their schedule. So all the work we do with our students to have conversations about building that healthy balance, finding that healthy balance for you as a student, trying new things, right? And getting out there and doing stuff, that's a larger conversation where this falls under that conversation as well. So it's not isolated to that. So if a student decides they're going to pack their schedule out and not have a lunch, I think that'll be a conversation with guidance counselors and parents to say, what's the right move here?
I more meant the impetus to take the pathway. Like we were talking about choice and how it won't be on the transcript and how it's just something they graduate with to give them, that next step. And those are excellent things, or whatever if they choose not to go to college. I'm saying there's going to be times more often than not where they can take it by the end of 11th grade because they've completed either 4.5 or 3.5 credits by doing whatever they do to their schedule and getting there. And that's all well and good, but we have to recognize and understand that it will be part of the transcript and the culture, not an afterthought for 12th grade after they've already applied and gotten it.
Mr. Greco.
So, Mr. Steinberg, I feel like I heard you say a bunch of times that you didn't think this would be something students would chase. And I think I heard Dr. Rogers say it as well, that the goal here is not to add pressure by including these pathways. And I feel like as long as, Sauron's eye stays on those two issues, I agree with Ms. Koshia that I see a lot of upside in having these pathways, and I see very little downside. So as long as that is what's guiding you in putting this together to avoid what Ms. Abramson is talking about, I'm fine with it, and I'm fine with starting it now. I mean, we have already. So, that's my 2 cents. Obviously, it's getting late, so I don't want to continue. But.
Mr. Rotolo?
Would we be able to take these during summer school? If you were interested, because say, hey, I want to do photography, but I don't have time in my schedule. Can I take it there? As long as it's an accredited teacher.
However the pathway is being built, if they're earning credits on their, towards graduation, if that course is part of a pathway, it certainly would count.
The other point was this exploratory and learning what you like and don't like. I think it's definitely for families much more affordable for you to decide that I like something or I don't like something in high school rather than $60,000 a semester, and guess what? I really don't like marketing. That's tough. There's a big incentive, especially for, how expensive college is. So, especially if you have multiple children in college, this is big help.
Okay, Ms. Levitin?
So I think it's critical when we explore something brand new like this, and the premise of it is excellent. Dr. Rogers, what percentage of our students graduating class goes to college, typically, in Syosset?
I'm going to guess it's somewhere around 98%, 4-year and 2-year together.
Excellent. So, to a college admission committee, a college is not in New York, pick any college, hypothetically, whatever, North Carolina. They look at the transcript, they see pathways. How much value what will it mean to them, to colleges that typically use APs as a common denominator, right, as an equalizer, if you will, the same way that historically, for college admissions purposes, the regions didn't really mean much because it's New York, a New York-specific phenomenon has been. Whereas an AP on your transcript has real weight. If you take 6 APs, 10 APs, that's what differentiates the applicants. So are we going to do our kids service by steering them, sort of like promoting this at the expense of taking another, a couple of more APs? In other words, in what context are we approaching this? Recognizing their passion, letting them learn a skill that might be useful. I mean, especially, if they already know what they want to do. I mean, some colleges give you 2 years to declare your major. So kids, a lot of the times just don't know yet. So I just, my main concern would be, you take these pathways, you sacrifice APs, and then you realize that it really, for the college that you're applying to, it didn't mean anything, to them. It's noise. That's my main concern. I don't know if I communicate clearly, but that would be my fear. I mean, I have a freshman in college in my last one, so I'm done, but I would be very concerned right now if I had a high schooler, because, it's a risky, we have to be so careful because it might cost them the college of their dreams, and by the time they get there, it'll be too late to correct things because we were experimenting with this, and it's too late. That's just my, thought, my 2 cents, my concern.
So I think we have to explore that worry a little bit, because if someone is going to choose to take a class that's in one of these pathways and forego an AP exam that they would have chosen otherwise, then my question would be, why? Why did the student choose that? So how does it either meet their interests or meet their goals? So let's use a hypothetical example. You want to go to SUNY Farmingdale because you want to work on advanced composite manufacturing with next-gen materials. Probably taking AP Lang and AP Lit is not going to make any difference in terms of the admissions conversation, but having the AutoCAD program will. But if you're looking to be an English teacher, having the AutoCAD experience probably not going to be all that helpful in the conversation there either. So if the student is sort of blindly working their way through high school and taking courses because they suspect that this credential might be good for them, then we failed them in the guidance conversations that we should be having all along the way with them. And, Mr. Rotolo, you talked about some of the tests we do with kids in 10th and 11th grade to assess their personalities, but we're doing Naviance as early as middle school to kind of get a sense of their interests and skills. That should feed into their guidance conversation. So part of the reason for not having this conversation with students until they're juniors is to make sure that they're letting their interests and their passions sort of drive their direction, as opposed to chasing this as a credential necessarily. But what should happen is if you have a student who is just really enthusiastic about business, and so they're loading up on business classes, there's an opportunity for them to earn a credential that recognizes all the business classes they loaded up on when they get to the end.
Right. Little comment that it's also a fact that a lot of colleges will literally take apart the transcript, throw away all the electives, no offense to business classes, and they will look at your core and your APs. So that's where we have to be careful. We have to sort of correlate or foresee what the colleges, what the trend is there in admissions. Is it still APs, and APs? Because it's the same, it's an equalizer across the states. So, that's why it has more value on the transcript. This still has to fight its place, so to speak, in the eyes of an admissions officer, in my opinion.
Right. I don't disagree with that assessment, and in our discussions about where we see the state going with their new graduation requirements, to the extent that the state continues to evolve away from the Regents exams, what we think is going to happen is that it only increases the value of other kinds of exams like AP, SUPA, the International Baccalaureate, et cetera, because those things will exist outside of the state's graduation requirements. To your point, they do have sort of a level setting, not just between schools in the state, but schools outside of the state. So if anything, probably the evolution of what the state's doing with graduation requirements increases the value of AP exams more than anything.
Mr. Rotolo?
And Anna, I agree with what you're saying too, but I think when we had the speaker, the professor from Carnegie Mellon come to kick off the year for the, great. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought he had brought up a point that you can go on, there's a PDF on college websites that tell you what the college prioritizes. Are they prioritizing your test taking or other skills? So that's not the case, I don't think, for all the colleges. I think that certain have priorities that might be different than just you taking the test. What was my other point I was going to make? So we were at, I think, the scope dinner, and someone from admissions from Columbia came over and sat at our table. And one of the things that he said was, oh, Syosset, we know you have a really strong curriculum. So, but again, it wasn't just because the kids had all these AP classes, but they had a recognition and a familiarity with our program. And I said, oh, do you know a lot of schools? You know, the other schools that do that? And he's like, no, well, we can't do every school, but certain schools we know because we've had students from there, we've had success with them graduating. So there were other factors. It wasn't just like everybody takes APs and that's the only way you're going to get into college. You know, I just want to, but there were other factors that, you know.
Thank you. Dr. Park?
So I would appreciate a direction from the administration and place the appropriate value to the pathway. So we don't want to undermine it, we don't want to overvalue it, and we need to know where the pathway sits in terms of each child, I guess, and advise our children appropriately. And I think it's going to be different now for our students who are in high school now versus students who's going to be in middle school and elementary school. So if we, even among 9 of us, there's a very different understanding of the value of the pathway, where, how much it plays, what significant role it plays in their future. So if you can advise correctly, appropriately, that will be beneficial.
Ms. Yakov?
So my understanding, so to Anna's point, my understanding with college admissions is they know what each school offers. So when they look at Syosset, they know that Syosset offers a gazillion AP classes and all these opportunities. And so our kids are expected to take a more rigorous schedule than a school that doesn't offer all those options, because you can't take something in your school that's not offered to you. And my fear is, and maybe it's unfounded and this isn't how it's going to go, and I hope that's true, because there's a lot of benefits to these pathways, and I think it can be used so beneficially for so many reasons. But my fear is that once it's known that these pathways are something that the kids can obtain, it's going to be one more thing that these kids are going to have to accomplish. So instead of taking 2 APs, our kids have to take 7. And instead of taking, and it's all about choice, right? So they don't have to, and it's a discussion they should have with their counselor and their parents and whoever else they want to talk to about. And, you know, but the reality is, how many of our sophomores and our juniors and our seniors don't take lunch? And That's great. My kid does that too. Do I think it's good for them? I don't. But they feel pressure to do that because they want to keep up with whatever it is that these colleges are looking for. And the more choice that they have, the more pressure we are putting on them. And while I believe we should have the choice and that there's benefits to that, we need to be very cognizant of all these options that we're giving these children, and we're putting it in terms of options and choice, and it instead is going to actually play out in reality as more pressure on what these kids have to do and have to accomplish and how that is affecting them. And I love the idea that kids get to explore a specific career path so that they know whether they want to continue it in college or not. But there's also something to be said for these kids to be able to take a broad array of subjects at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old that isn't all down one field, to see what things they may not know they like, and to take a variety of things, because then when they get to college, if they have to start specializing, they're never going to have the opportunity to take other courses in other subjects that they might have been interested in, but they never had the opportunity to explore because they picked the pathway when they were 14 years old, and now they're heading down that way. And so I know I feel like I say it all the time, but you wouldn't let a child who had a concussion choose to play in the football game. We would tell them you can't play in the football game because you have a concussion, whether you want to choose to play in it or not. And I think that we need to be very careful about how we are protecting our kids from the amount of pressure that they put on themselves, especially in our culture and our environments. So that's it. Thanks.
Mr. Greco.
Mr. Steinberg, Ms. Valkov, I completely understand what you're saying, and I agree with it, but I thought Mr. Steinberg said something along the lines of that this is not something that we're going to chase, and that this is not something that is going to be decided early and pigeonholing kids, because I do think there's great value in having a very broad class schedule in the high school. Mr. Steinberg, could you elaborate on that?
So the conversation wouldn't happen with the students until 11th grade in terms of what their natural course choices look like. So when students come in their 9th or 10th grade, they would only know about the pathways by word of mouth and know about a pathway. And if they choose to take courses that lead them down a path, let's call it a path, because of their interest, that's their natural choice to do something like that. The school would only have that conversation in the 11th grade year, just to make them aware that, look, you have one more year in high school, and if this is something you would like to complete and get recognition for, then you would have something like that. I do understand the point that, the community sees this as another get and then becomes pressurized to do so. But I'll go back to what Dr. Rogers' point was earlier, that in our discussions internally about the impact this would have in our community, by taking the value of the regents away, right? So then what's the differentiating factor then for students who are competing for these high-profile colleges? It's going to be the AP exams. It's going to be SUPA. So we have concerns that the pressure is not going to be on the pathway causing the pressure. The pathway is going to be on, I have to take more APs because the value of the regents has gone down and now the value of the APs has increased. And so we'll be back to having the conversation we've had for a long time, and how do we help our students to create a balanced schedule so they're not graduating with 40 APs under their belt, because it sometimes feels that's the direction we're going. So we don't see as much the pathway, the technical endorsement going down that road, because there isn't a value placed on it outside. There is no value in a transcript. The universities aren't placing any value on it. So there isn't a value on it. And I think ultimately, as this rolls out and there's more and more conversation and there's more clarity around the purpose behind this and the type of students it's truly going to serve, it's really going to serve those students who might struggle passing Regents exams for graduation. And this becomes that alternative means of demonstrating proficiency outside of that Regents exam. and why we were not predicting that this is going to be something that's going to have 1,000 kids running through it. It's going to be there as an alternative, but what we did recognize is in the endorsements that we did not have a program that served our kids to obtain that endorsement. And so through this program, we now have that option for students to do that. But ultimately, because the Regents is going to be devalued in terms of its graduation importance, APs will go up, but all of your masteries and all of your honors and advanced designation endorsements are still in place. So our students are still going to go after those things.
I just appreciate that message. Like, I appreciate that being the message, but it has to translate the right way down. Because sometimes that's the message here, and it doesn't translate into the culture. And I think that's the purpose. I don't think anyone says this is like a new standard or a new AP or I think that what we're scared of is that that message gets lost and muddied, and it becomes another part of a culture of competitiveness, as opposed to look at an alternative way to help our students succeed. So I think, let's focus there.
Okay, all right. Thank you. We definitely have a lot of discussions and a lot of conversation on this pathway topic, and I do see this as something that's going to be keep evolving, and with all the discussions that we have so far from tonight from the board, I do recommend that the administration take all the discussions back and then do some sort of refinement and report back to the board. Do we have a consensus on that? No, just based on our discussion, and then have the administration, and then do some refinement, and then keep us updated as we go along. And whenever that becomes available, we'll get another, updating. Are we okay with that? Are we okay with that? Yeah. Okay. All right. Are we all good? All right. Thank you. All right. So this concludes our discussion items, and we are going to move to item 11A, and that's the adoption of board goals. And can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? Mr. Oshik, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question, statement, opinion, et cetera. Edit, actually. So we passed a lot of feedback on to the facilitator during discussion. And one of the goals, the third goal about connected community, I think has, I don't remember this statement being agreed to. I remember there was discussion around it, but there's a concept missing here that is, I think, absolutely crucial to adopting the goals, and that is that I think what this connected community goal is trying to get to is collaboration and discussion, but it's not a collaborative culture in decision making. And there's a meaningful difference between us building strong connections between people and making sure people are collaborative in decision making when it happens. And I think the difference is meaningful enough that it needs to be amended.
Do you have a recommendation of what you would change?
I do. So I would rather foster a strong collaborative culture in decision making with all families and stakeholders rather than fostering strong, meaningful connections.
Say it again, Jack.
Oh, sure. We will foster a strong collaborative culture in decision making with all families and stakeholders and strike meaningful connections.
Can you just do the second part again?
Yeah, strike meaningful connections. I'm in Connected Community Goal 3. Am I not being clear? So it would read, we will foster strong collaborative culture in decision-making with all families and stakeholders and take out meaningful connections. In the first sentence.
What do you mean by decision-making? I understand what you're trying, I'm not sure if I understand what you're, do you mean like, would we vote? Like we're 9 elected officials to represent the community. So what do you mean by decision-making? Because I just want to be clear what we're trying to.
Sure, so these aren't goals for the board, these are goals for the administration and the district. So when they're making decisions in a collaborative fashion with stakeholders and families involved.
This was what we were discussing at the work session on January 30th, and that's what, at the end of the meeting, this is what we talked about, and then Dr. McGowan sent us the revised version, and this is exactly what it is.
I think Dr. McGowan sent this revised version to us for today. I don't think it appeared prior to today.
He did repeat that at the meeting.
He did repeat what at the meeting?
And Dr. Rogers shared that version just a few days after our meeting with Dr. McGowan. So early February, we got that version, and this is exactly what we shared.
After our meeting?
After we talked about it at the work session,
Mm-hmm.
and Dr. McGowan, we talked about the verbiage that he was going to use. And then he sent the version to Dr. Rogers, and Dr. Rogers shared that with the board a few days after January 30th.
Okay, and this has been our first opportunity to discuss that, right?
I don't disagree with Jack, Mr. Ostricht. I actually agree with him. I just don't know if I love the language. And I don't really have a response or better language for you. But I do agree with the concept. But I don't think saying collaborative culture and decision-making and strike a meaningful connection is the way to do it.
If we just do, we will foster strong collaborative culture with all families and stakeholders. No, he had decision-making. In decision-making. What if we just do, we will foster strong collaborative culture with all families and stakeholders?
And make meaningful connections with all family stakeholders, ensuring. Maybe that's the way to do it.
Add collaborative culture.
So we'll do the.
I think it would read, I think we're saying it would read, we will foster a strong collaborative culture. And I think Brian wanted to keep and make meaningful connections with all families and stakeholders, ensuring blah, 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 blah.
Mr. Ostricht, maybe including, I assume you want the decision-making concept built into this sentence. And I just think if it went towards the end and
I think that's great. If we want to have collaborative culture in the beginning of the sentence and decision-making at the end, that's wonderful. But ultimately, the goal is, or what I'm saying that I would like in the goal, is that decision-making being of a collaborative nature is paramount to us having, what's the way I want to phrase it? I think it's an important element of the culture that we're trying to create. And I think that it needs to be incorporated into the goal. So if there's collaborative culture and you want to, word phrase the beginning, that's fine, and have everyone is a meaningful, everyone feels heard, supported, and invested in success, whatever it is. But I think the key element is that decision-making needs to feel like people are participating and that they're consulted, and that we highlight it as a way that the administration conducts decision-making.
So this is my obvious first impression of hearing this addition to the goals. So I'm trying to understand what it means. So I'm trying to think of the kinds of decisions that get made and understand how collaboration would occur. So I'm going to place decision-making along a continuum and use the extremes to illustrate examples. So at one end of the continuum, we have a crisis. There are a lot of decisions that get made in the middle of a crisis. None of those are collaborative, nor would you want them to be. So that clearly doesn't meet the definition of what you're looking for in a culture. There are other decisions that are choices between two unknowns that may or may not have a good outcome. And so with decision-making comes accountability. So when you have collaboration in decision-making, the people who are part of that collaboration have to also share in the accountability for it. So at some point you say, well, there are really big decisions like having a bond passed in the community to put a lot of the community's money into improving the facilities. That's clearly a very collaborative decision-making process that took place over the course of months with endless presentations and videos and documents and work with architects and feedback sessions, et cetera. And in the end, the community did make a decision in collaboration with us. They decided that they wanted to make that investment. So those are sort of the two extremes, the crisis and then the public vote on something. And then there's a whole bunch of things that are strewn all along the continuum in between. And I don't know how these words affect where the line between autonomy and accountability would fall with any of the decisions that lie in between those two extremes. So again, this is a reaction of first impression, but I have to give it some thought as to how someone would operationalize this in anything other than sort of an aspirational way.
The word participation, which may take away your continuum issue and meet your needs, but if you said in the end of the sentence, if you added the word participation within this, so that it feels like they're a more active community that are participating in the district and the community and have true stakeholders like that, maybe that'll satisfy without going into the abyss over there.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers, for talking for a while, as I was able to write something. How about this, Jack? We will foster a strong collaborative culture and make meaningful connections with all families and stakeholders, ensuring an inclusive and cooperative school community where every person feels valued, heard, and has a true sense of belonging. Does that work?
Dr. Park? I was thinking, like Dr. Rogers said, when you said decision-making, I was thinking about masking. There were a group of people who did not want to put masks. And by making decision of not putting the mask on, Okay, so that's what I was thinking, like, that will lose funding from the state. So decision-making part was kind of triggering alert from my sense. But here it says, the second sentence, where through effective communication and deeper engagement, shouldn't that satisfy your concern of being collaborative with the community?
So it's not, it's community and stakeholders, right? So the idea that everyone who is a stakeholder in Mhm.
So you don't want to include the word collaborative? Jack, are you okay with what I read out loud? Is that I don't know what the word is, but is that a middle ground that you would take?
Sort of, right? This isn't the first time I wrote feedback to Mr. McGowan about this. So it's not the first time this has come up in conversation. I guess ultimately when I think about this, I'm envisioning the decisions like when we, I don't know, have start time conversations, right? Like that's a collaborative decision making, right? When we normally do those kinds of things. When we talk about curriculum, making sure all the right people, a wide group of people are involved in that conversation. I'm thinking about just an organizational culture where the default thought process is, do we have the right people and enough stakeholders and all the right stakeholders in the room to make good decisions? And I want that to be the default thought for all administrators, right? Do we have all the right people that we need to make these decisions collaboratively in this room?
We will foster a strong collaborative culture and make meaningful connections with all families and stakeholders, ensuring an inclusive and cooperative school community where every person feels valued, heard, and has a true sense of belonging, period.
Okay, Ms. Koshia?
I hear Mr. Greco what he's saying, but we have feels heard in the last sentence, so we're being repetitive on that. But I'm not okay, I don't want to put the decision-making in, I think we said that already, but can we just change deeper engagement in the second sentence and put collaboration? So we say through effective communication and collaboration, we will strengthen relationships, blah, blah, blah. Then you add the word collaboration, which is, you know, we're working together to make decisions, because it is implied in here that it's part of it. But I'm also a little bit, you know, we worked on this for so many hours, and we're supposed to just be voting on it, and to try to change and wordsmith it after a 3-hour, you know, sitting here and having other discussions is very difficult right now. And I don't want to sign off on something that we've put like a long time in, many, many hours. So I'm like not okay with that. If we can we table it and just come back to it to pass it? Because I don't want to just throw words and approve it.
Ms. Falco?
I really don't want to table it. I think it's so important. I totally agree with you, Lisa, about it's late and we worked so long on this and approving it, but I really want the administration to be able to start making plans and to start implementing this like as soon as possible. We worked so hard on this, and I really want to see like it come to fruition and really get a move on. So if we could just spend like a few minutes and figure it out so we don't have to do it again, that would be my vote.
Ms. Abramson?
Do you think that there's a big difference between deeper engagement and collaboration? Do they generally mean the same thing? Are we saying the same things, but you like the word collaboration better? Is that the big change? I'm just trying to get to the bottom line.
If the question for me was your change okay by me? Yes. The one that you read to me.
So we don't need.
I don't want the repetitiveness that Ms. Koshia brought up. So drop the "and heard" in the first sentence, leave it in the second sentence, and I think it works. Good catch, Lisa.
Just adding, will foster a strong collaborative culture and making meaningful connections, right?
Do you want to? We will foster a strong collaborative culture and make meaningful connections. Everything else remains the same.
Are you okay with just adding these few words? Nothing else changes? Okay, all right. So, and that's for the connected community. And all the other areas, academic, inclusive, and the transparent and efficiency operations will remain the same. And it's just the connected community, we're adding that one sentence only. Everything else is the same, okay? All right. We're just adding what you just read?
Yes.
Okay, all right. All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Okay. 12A is the appointment of assistant clerk, permanent chairperson, chief election inspectors, and election inspectors for the school district budget vote and annual district election on May 20th, 2025. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 12B is the approval of staff changes. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 12C is the approval of stipends and hourly rates 2024-2025. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 12D is the approval of coaching recommendations. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 12E is the approval of pay rate for overnight field trips. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 12F is the appointment of interim director of pupil personnel services. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 12G and 12H can be taken together, and it's the approval of exams of an employee pursuant to Education Law, Section 913. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13A and 13B can be taken together, and they're the approval of the Committee on Preschool Special Education and the Committee on Special Education Recommendations. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Levitan, seconded by Mr. Ostrick. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13C is the nomination of Nassau BOCES Board of Trustees Fran Langsner and Robert B. A. Sean. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 13D is the approval of new and revised policies. 0130 district complaint procedures for federal programs. 1120 school district records. 4321, Programs for Students with Disabilities under the IDEA and New York Education Law, Article 89. 8130, School Safety Plans and Teams. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14A is the authorization of service contracts. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14B is the authorization for special education and/or nursing contracts. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Levitan, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14C is the authorization for health services. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Abramson. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14D is the approval of Student Club Charters 2024-2025. Can I have a motion, please? Ms. Levitan, seconded by Ms. Falco. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14E is the approval of Student Group Charters 2024-2025. Can I have a motion, please? Dr. Park, seconded by Mr. Rotolo. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14F is the authorization of extension of agreement. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14G is the authorization for piggybacking Southampton Union Free School District Stage Curtains bid, SPS 23-003, first extension. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Ms. Koshia. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14H is the authorization for piggybacking Southampton Union Free School District School Supplies and Materials bid number SPS 24-004, first extension. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14I is the authorization for piggybacking Southampton Union Free School District Science Supplies and Materials, bid number SPS 24-005. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14J is the authorization for piggybacking Belmore Merrick Building and Grounds Equipment. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Rotolo, seconded by Dr. Park. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? 14K is the disposal of broken, surplus, and/or obsolete equipment, supplies, and books. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Greco, seconded by Ms. Levitan. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? There's no audience to the public, and this will conclude our March Board of Education meeting. And the next meeting will take place on Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. I know it sounds early, but have a safe and fun spring break.